Okay, we're all here? All Commissioner? All right, we will call the July 10th meeting of the Planning Commission to order. I want to welcome all of you today. Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Allen?
Here.
Commissioner Delbs?
Yes.
Commissioner Karapetkov?
Yes.
Chair LePage?
Here.
And Commissioner Locke is absent.
Yes, okay, all right. So the first item on our agenda are the public appearances. I have a little script here I need to read to you. Under the Brown Act, public comment for matters on the agenda must relate to that agenda item, and public comments for matters not on the agenda must relate to the subject matter jurisdiction of this legislative body. This is a warning that if a member of the public attending this meeting remotely violates the Brown Act by failing to comply with these requirements of the Brown Act, then the speaker will be muted. All right, so at this time, any members of the public may address the Planning Commission on any matters of municipal concern which are not on our agenda tonight.
Good evening or afternoon, Chair LePage. My name is Ian Martin. I'm a resident and a former planning commissioner. So last night there was a great big late night discussion about CEQA, and I want to invite the Planning Commission to develop a deeper understanding of CEQA and how it might be used in this municipality. There's a lot of additional stuff that went on that really didn't pertain to the law last night. I think that there's all a big host of different things that I thought really distracted from the issue. And the issue is whether or not this municipality should be using CEQA, not only as a matter of law, but also as a matter of protecting our village character. So I would encourage the Planning Commission to perhaps even form a subcommittee and study CEQA in depth to decide whether or not this municipality is in fact following the law when it comes to making so many exemptions for it, but then also should it be a tool that we're using in our municipality for its largest projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Any other members like to address the Planning Commission on any matters which are not on our agenda tonight? I don't see anybody coming forward in the chamber. Anybody online, Leah?
No, sir, no one online.
Okay, we will close the public comments, move on. Are there any announcements from staff?
No, sir.
Any announcements from the commissioners? None, okay. All right, so that brings us to the public hearings. Oh, excuse me, I missed the consent agenda. All right, so the consent agenda, items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine in nature, but any item may be pulled for further discussion at the request of the public or commissioners. We have 4 items on the consent agenda tonight. We have the monthly activity report for June. We have a design review DS 22150, the Carpenter project. We have DS 22151, another project located on Carpenter, and we have DS 2337, the Kim project. These items, like I said, have been reviewed by us before, and there don't seem to be any outstanding issues, so they are on the consent agenda tonight. Are there any of the commissioners that have any questions? Or no. Okay. Anyone from the public that would like any of these items pulled for questions or discussion? Anybody online?
No, sir.
Okay, in that case, I'll make a motion that we accept the consent agendas item 1, 2, 3, and 4.
I can second. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Seconded? All right. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Delbs?
Yes.
Commissioner Karapetkov?
Yes.
Chair LePage?
Yes, motion is carried. All right, that brings us to the public hearings. And the first item on the public hearing tonight is a design review. This is DR 23140 and a lot merger 20394 and a use permit 21113. This is Esperanza Carmel Commercials JV Pastor Building. This is consideration of a design review and a use permit and a lot merger and associated coastal development permit for the construction of a 12,736 square foot, 2-story mixed-use development spread across 4 separate buildings with 8 apartment units and approximately 5,100 square feet of commercial space with an 852 square foot basement and surface parking area at the rear of the property with a total of 12 parking spaces utilizing 5 parking lifts on a site containing an existing 621 square foot historic structure located at Dolores Street, 2 southwest of 7th Avenue. Can we have the staff report, please?
Mr. Chair, I think weren't you going to ask, you had asked a question about the information received last minute. Did you want us to speak to any of the last minute information that we received on this project?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm not sick, but my daughter
No,
is, so I don't
know,
want to
but-
share it. You had asked a question of staff about some of the last minute reports, information that we received, like from the California Housing Defense Fund. Did you want staff to speak to any of that?
Yeah, staff could go over that in their report if they want to start out with that. If you feel that's the way to start, go ahead.
Yeah, well, so we did receive, just for the commission's consideration, we did receive a letter yesterday at around 5 or 6 p.m. from the California Housing Defense Fund, making some statements about the application of the Housing Act and how it related to this project relative to the commission's ability to have discretionary design review on the project. Because it was so late last night and we were all in city council, we have not had the time to fully analyze that letter at this point, so we don't really have any sort of response for the commission on their position and how it relates to this project regarding the discretionary design review that's part of the purview of this commission. So I don't really have an answer for you because it came in at 6 o'clock last night. We did also receive a letter, a resident letter a couple of days ago, a sizable letter, and we've done our best to respond to the questions in that, and Evan has rolled that into his presentation. But again, that was a later letter, and so we've done our best. We did receive those 2 late correspondences with some pretty substantial comments in them. So I just wanted to share that with the commission. We may not have every answer for you tonight, especially regarding the letter received from the California Housing Defense Fund.
Okay. I think at this time, though, we should still have our staff report, and then the commission will consider that in their comments, whether or not that we need that explanation before we can make a decision.
Great, thank you.
Okay, staff report, please.
Good job.
All right, so my slideshow is a little bit long, so please feel free to make yourself comfortable. The project site is located at Dolores Street 2 southeast of 7th Avenue in the Service Commercial Zoning District. Subject site is located at the site of the Northern California Savings and Loan Complex, and a determination of consistency with the Secretary of Standards has been issued by the City Council. All site improvements, with the exception of the community room and associated features around the community room, including the historic walls, are proposed to be demolished to accommodate the new construction of a mixed-use development. The applicant is proposing to construct a 13,428 square foot mixed-use development, which includes that includes a 852 square foot utility basement. That basement is not included in the floor area totals for the project. The project includes 8 market rate rental apartments, a 5,882 square feet of commercial space split between 7 commercial units. 12 on-site parking spaces are provided, and 10 of those spaces use parking lifts. The project also includes public way improvements as well as landscaping throughout. The Northern California Savings and Loan Complex is located on lots 2, 4, 6, and 8 of Block 91, with the project site being located on lots 6, 8, and 10. Lot 10 is not located on part of the complex site. However, lots 6 and 8 are part of the historic complex. In accordance with the city's historic preservation ordinance, the city contracted with a qualified professional historian, past consultants, to prepare the determination of consistency. The evaluation concluded that the project is consistent with the Secretary's standards. The Historic Resources Board considered the project at their July 17th meeting, this was last year, 2023, and adopted a resolution issuing a determination of consistency. During the 10-day appeal period for the decision, the City Council enacted the City Council right of review and reviewed the decision made by the Historic Resources Board. The City Council considered the project at their September 12th hearing, acting in the capacity of the HRB, and provided staff with direction to prepare a resolution overturning the previous Historic Resources Board determination of consistency for the subject project with new findings of consistency and conditions of approval. The final action by the council was to adopt a resolution overturning the July 2023 decision of the HRB and issue a determination of consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards with new findings and conditions. And that was Resolution 2023-099. The City Council gave direction for consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards that prior to review by the Planning Commission, the design review plan shall be revised such that the original ornamented concrete walls located adjacent to the community room are shown to remain in the original locations and configurations. So in the plan submitted to the HRB and reviewed by the City Council, those ornamented concrete walls were shown to be partially removed or relocated. And then these revised plans show the original portion of show the original ornamented concrete walls remaining in their entirety in the original locations. So these were the proposed demolition relocation plans, and then in the revised plans, those walls are intact in their original locations. Council also gave direction prior to review by the Planning Commission that the design review plan shall be revised to preserve the existing spatial relationships of the Northern California Savings and Loan Complex, and in summary, shall not encroach with the preservation buffer illustrated in the red shaded area in the figure on the screen. The applicant has revised the project to substantially comply with the preservation buffer which was established in Exhibit A as part of Resolution 2023-099, and that was that determination of consistency adopted by the City Council. The red outline on the slide illustrates the previously proposed building outline that was considered by the City Council, and the site plan on the screen illustrates the revised ground floor site plan. This slide illustrates the second floor plan in relation to the preservation buffer. And this slide illustrates the roof plan in relation to the preservation buffer. The associated resolution did provide an allowance for projections of roof eaves up to 18 inches. So even though there is a slight projection of roof eave, this is consistent with the established preservation buffer. The exception for consistency with the preservation buffer is the proposed trash enclosure located at the northeast corner of the lot. The condition established by City Council established in part that at a minimum, all proposed structural elements shall be located outside the preservation buffer, with exceptions granted for walkways, at-grade stairways, landings, pavings, and similar features. As such, staff has included condition of approval number 50, requiring that the garbage enclosure be located to an area outside of the preservation buffer. Should the applicant wish to pursue locating the garbage enclosure within the preservation buffer, either as proposed or in a similar manner, staff recommends the applicant return to City Council in order for the council to amend Resolution 2023-099 to allow the council to make an allowance for the trash enclosure as appropriate. Council also gave direction to ensure that the Northern California Savings and Loan Complex is not subordinated by the proposed development, that the design review plans shall be revised to preserve the context of the site so that the Savings and Loan Complex remains a prominent feature as viewed from 7th Avenue and Dolores Street. According to the applicant, this is a quote, "The proposed project is subordinated to the community building and ornamented concrete wall complex. The Dolores Street facade preserves the identity of the complex. The existing driveway opening along Dolores is maintained in a 12-foot setback from the ornamented concrete and is set back 12 feet from the ornamented concrete wall. The preservation buffer line only requires a 5-foot setback. Furthermore, Unit 106 of the proposed commercial accommodation has a single-story 2-foot 6-inch setback from Dolores Street, with the second-story apartment setback 5 feet further, or with the second-story apartment 5-foot setback further. The applicant has also further modified the project to minimize impacts to the project against the adjacent complex. The development reviewed by the HRB and City Council were proposed to be 15,119 square feet, whereas the revised project is 12,807 square feet. Those numbers I just stated exclude the existing community room and reflect the new construction only. And then these figures also provide a visual comparison of the Dolores Street elevations. The project considered by the City Council is the bottom figure, and then the revised Planning Commission project, the project you're reviewing today, is the top figure. So you can see on the slide, we have the increased setback between the buildings. This is what we were primarily observing today on the site tour. And then again, here we have the view from 7th Avenue. This is what was considered by the City Council. This is what we are considering today. So the site is allowed a base coverage of 9,600 square feet, or 80% of the site area. The applicant is not proposing to take advantage of any building coverage bonus and is proposing 9,242 square feet of coverage, or approximately 77% of the site area, 358 square feet less than what is allowed. There's no required setback in the service commercial zoning district, and buildings are permitted to be constructed up to the property lines on all sides of the property. However, the street level ground facing facade of each building is required to be established on the property line or within 2 feet of the property line. Excuse me. At the October 3rd, 2023 meeting, the City Council adopted a determination of consistency for the project with new findings and conditions. Of these adopted findings, the council found that a waiver from the build 2 line requirement may be granted by the Planning Commission for a portion of the project located on Lot 8, which is one of the historic sites, or one of the historic lots, for up to 5 feet from the property line. This waiver and creation of a design nonconformity is granted in accordance with Municipal Code Section 1732-100D, benefits available to historic resources on the register, and is intended to be a benefit to the applicant and not a mandated requirement. The applicant has elected to take advantage of this waiver provision and has proposed a setback of 2 feet 6 inches from the property line for the building located on Lot 8, and the new development located on Lot 10 meets the 2-foot build 2 line, and the use of the waiver is only applicable to the portions of the building on Lot 8. Lot 8 is this middle lot, and then Lot 10 is this lot. So that waiver is only applicable to this area right in here. The remaining site area that is not building coverage is considered open space. A minimum of 50% of the required open space on the site shall be landscaped, which may include non-living materials such as garden benches, water features, and pattern paving treatments, as long as the total combined area of such plant alternative does not occupy more than 25% of the required landscaping on any site. The city does not have a required open space development standard, only open space generally, which provides the quantified amount. Open space could be an area that is free of structures, and any visually accessible, an area free of structures and visually accessible from public ways or walkways, or a private open space, or a usable open space, or a common open space, as traditionally considered by the Planning Commission. The site is proposed to be landscaped on the ground floor and roof areas, and a detailed paving and benches throughout the project site, as well as providing access to the historic decorative concrete wall. The landscape requirements meets the initial requirements for application approval. The landscaping has been preliminarily been reviewed by the city forester with no substantial comment, and the final landscape plan shall be reviewed by the city forester prior to building permit issuance. The site allows a base floor area ratio of 16,200 square feet, or 135%. The applicant has not provided any design features that would qualify the site for a floor area bonus. The applicant is proposing a total project floor area of 13,428 square feet, or 112%, which is 2,772 square feet less than what is allowed. In accordance with Municipal Code Section 1714-140C, no single structure shall contain more than 10,000 square feet of floor area. Interaccessibility between adjacent structures on one or more building sites by any means that allows passage between structures without first exiting to an area of open space, without exiting to an open space area shall not be allowed if the resulting floor area contained within the combined structures would exceed 10,000 square feet of floor area. The project is proposed to consist of 5 individual buildings, each less than 10,000 square feet, and those proposed building square footages are listed on the screen. Staff does concur with the applicant's square footage totals for each of the buildings. However, staff does not concur that, as illustrated in the plans, that the project represents 5 individual structures. The commission has previously provided direction that separate buildings could potentially be connected with a second floor egress balcony. However, the proposed buildings share a common covered roof connection. In staff's opinion, this is inconsistent with the subject provision being discussed. As proposed, there is a single common second floor roof connection between 4 of the 5 buildings, which functions as a covered walkway. This conflicts with the subject requirements, which requires exiting to an area of open space. The commission has previously provided direction on other projects that the open space, as described above, shall be an area free of structures. So there's kind of a lot going on this slide, but the individual buildings listed on this slide are all numbered. This red outline is the second floor egress balcony, which is also connected by this common roof element. So with this shared connection, what staff has identified is this creates a single structure. However, the commission may be inclined to consider an alternative. The subject code provision only states that interaccessibility between adjacent structures shall first require passage to an area of open space, but does not specify what type of open space. A definition of open space is provided in Municipal Code Section 1714-170 and has been used in the past as the implementation metric to enforce the subject provision. And that is defined right here. That's this definition. Furthermore, a variety of open space types are also expressly defined in definitions, which is section 1770, which is right down here, which have not been previously considered by the commission. Those definitions include private open space, usable open space, and common open space. Should the commission be inclined, the commission could make findings that the project, as proposed, meet the intent of this section, as the egress balcony could be considered one of the alternative open space types, and therefore the project is consistent with the requirements of this chapter, as passageway to an area of open space is made before circulating into another building. The variety of open space types, private space, or private open space, usable open space, or common open space, do not require or mandate they be uncovered or open to the sky. Municipal Code Section 1752-060F specifically grants the Planning Commission the power and responsibility to interpret the meaning and intent of the city's land use code. Therefore, the commission could find the project is consistent with the alternative provided by staff. However, as conditioned, staff does recommend that the roof plan be revised such that there is no common covering or connection between buildings, consistent with past planning commission direction. However, the planning commission can make findings to support the alternative. And we do have a condition of approval reflecting the staff recommendation. That's condition of approval number 51. The project is proposed to be just shy of the 30-foot height limit and will be less than 29 feet 9 inches at the tallest point, though the majority of the building will be well less than the height limit due to the sloping nature of the site in the vicinity. Small areas not exceeding 10% of the proposed building coverage, occupied by special design features such as towers, steeples, ornamentation, may exceed these heights if approved by the Planning Commission. The applicant has included 2 chimneys that would project above the 30-foot height limit. Those elements are 33 feet 6 inches at the tallest point. 3 chimneys are actually proposed for the project, however, only 2 of them would exceed these height limits. The commission should consider whether these projections should be permitted. However, as conditioned, staff has not required the emission, or has not conditioned the emission of the proposed chimneys. Right-of-way improvements are required for all new buildings in the commercial districts. The applicant has prepared a public improvement plan that includes the installation of a new upper canopy street tree to be planted within a structural cell, replacement of the adjacent sidewalk, and replacement of the adjacent driveway. All improvements are conditioned to be consistent with the city's public way design standards. Based on the parking factors in the service commercial district and proposed land uses, the site is required 16.6 on-site parking spaces. The applicant has proposed 12 on-site parking spaces, all of which are proposed to be located in a garage at the rear of the site, and will utilize the existing driveway. The remaining 4.6 spaces are proposed to be provided through payment of in-lieu fees. The municipal code expressly recognizes that some sites, due to size, shape, topography, existing buildings, the availability of land suitable for parking purposes, or location within a specific land use district may have difficulty meeting all parking requirements. Therefore, the municipal code provides some exceptions to increase the flexibility in meeting requirements, including participation in the city's in-lieu program. As described by the applicant, and again, this is a quote, "As a result of the site constraints associated with maintaining the historic savings and loan building and related historic site improvements along the required buffer, we have now modified the proposed JB Pastor project to reduce the overall area of the proposed commercial space at the ground level and reduce the area of the residential apartments at the second level. Additionally, the site constraints due to the historic community room building and the associated site improvements do not allow for the required area needed to accommodate all the required parking in an underground parking structure, since we cannot feasibly excavate under the existing community room building. And if we were to excavate around the historic building and site improvements, we may risk damage to these important historical assets. As a result, the applicant has pursued a partial satisfaction of the on-site requirements through the in-lieu program." There are 4 use permits associated with the project. Each permit maintains a number of associated findings, code requirements, and conditions of approval. An analysis was prepared in the staff report for each associated use permit, and the findings were made in the affirmative for each. Staff is prepared to speak to the specific requirements of each if requested by the commission, and the general findings for all the use permits are listed on the slide on the right. So as described by the applicant, the design intent is to respect and preserve the historic village character, integrate with residential attribution of the community and pedestrian-friendly environment. The overall design concept includes harmony of interior and exterior spaces as an overall experience, open space gallery for pedestrian use in the commercial area, including permanent planters, landscape areas, and benches. Access to commercial units is through 2 access points in the sidewalk on Dolores Street. In the second floor apartments, outdoor covered open balconies to access each unit, and courtyards to some of the units are features that allow indoor and outdoor experience. This will be achieved with a harmonized architecture in the immediate surroundings of Spanish, colonial, Italianate, and Mediterranean structures. The proposed project will have facades that will reminisce traditional architecture of the period through use of traditional elements such as authentic clay tile roofs, wood corbels and beams, decorative wrought iron railings, limestone floors, cantilevered features, window projections, and the like. The proposed project scale and form will complement the rhythm of structures in the immediate vicinity through the use of proportioned storefront fenestrations for the commercial areas and properly scaled in the apartments. The use of character-defining details through eaves, parapets, overhangs, finishing details, and similar features. The undulating walls creating shadow lines that cultivate interest in architecture will be achieved. The use of natural stone and mixed with stucco, including molding surroundings of fenestration, add texture and color. Each building facade has interest and have no long blank walls. The various building heights add to the creation of various roof forms and a village feel. So staff is recommending the project be found categorically exempt with the California Environmental Quality Act, state guidelines, and local environmental regulations pursuant to Section 15332, Class 32 infill developments. Findings for this exemption were prepared as part of the staff report, and if requested by the commission, staff can walk the commission through the findings or answer specific questions regarding the exemption. So findings supporting the use of the Class 32 categorical exemption were attached to the staff report as attachment 2. The project does meet all criteria for use of the Class 32 exemption, and there are no exceptions to the exemption. And then we also did receive a number of public correspondences in respect to the project that I'll briefly go through. So one correspondence letter addressed concerns regarding an adjacent property, and that that adjacent property may be historic. So the CEQA guidelines state that a historic structure is either a resource listed in or determined to be eligible for listing in the California Register of Historic Resources. A formal determination of eligibility for the California Register is different than a presumption of significance. So this is it. The city's historic preservation ordinance prescribes a manner in which evaluation for a property shall occur. And this specific neighboring property has not been determined to be eligible for listing and is not a local resource. Furthermore, the city council has adopted a determination of consistency that the project meets the Secretary of Interior standards. And generally, when a project meets the Secretary of Interior standards, that shall be considered that the project has a less than significant impact on the historical resource. Similarly, so this was from another individual we received a letter from, that the project does not comply with the city's requirements, that the project is inconsistent with the Secretary's standards. Again, the City Council has adopted a determination of consistency, finding the project consistent with the Secretary's standards. There were conditions to address, which the applicant responded to, and the Commission is considering their response today. Then also the project does not comply with the landscape requirements. This was discussed in my presentation. The project does comply with the landscape requirements. The project does not comply with the build to line requirements. The City Council did grant a waiver in accordance with our historic preservation ordinance. So therefore it does comply with the build to line requirements. The project does not comply with the building floor area limits. This was due to the buildings exceeding 10,000 square feet. As conditioned, the project does comply. There was a note that the project does not comply with parking requirements. Parking is provided on site and through payment of in lieu fees. Whether you provide parking entirely on site or entirely through the in lieu fee program or a combination of both, that is adopted through our zoning code. So even if 100% of the parking were paid through the in lieu program, that would be enough to satisfy the parking requirement. However, only a small amount of the parking is proposed to be provided through the in lieu program. And that determination of eligibility for participation in the in lieu program is at the discretion of the Planning Commission and part of this action. There's also a comment about parking for the restaurant site. That parking for the restaurant actually became non-conforming in 2018 when the associated lots were sold. That parking has no bearing on this subject property because it is actually part of a separate property. So that action was done in 2018. And then there are also some concerns about CEQA and the use of the categorical exemption in relation to traffic noise and air quality effects. So CEQA does allow the use of conditions of approval to address impacts. We do have construction management plans, best management practices, grading and drainage plans, which are all standard conditions of approval. We require them on all of our projects. Some of these are code requirements. So in adhering to the general plan policies and regulations regarding our noise impacts, those should be, will have a less than significant impact relating to noise. We also have thresholds for operational standards during operation of the project. Again, this is just the shell of the project. So construction of a mixed-use building will not have any operational impacts in respect to noise. We're within the Monterey Bay Air Resources District. Sorry, Brandon, help me out. Monterey Bay Air Resources District. I'm just having a moment.
About how this takes care of the impact?
No, jurisdiction.
There you go.
Thank you.
I didn't do anything.
No,
well.
no, you
Yeah,
did
okay.
you did more than you know. We're in the jurisdiction of the Monterey Bay Air Resources District jurisdiction. They establish thresholds for significance as it relates to CEQA. Their threshold of significance for air quality impacts during construction is 2.2 acres of grading per day. This project site is 0.275 acres and is below the threshold of 2.2 acres of grading, and therefore it doesn't cross that threshold of significance to have a air quality impact. And then the applicant also did provide us with a traffic study, and both the residential and commercial portions of the project are well below the thresholds of significant for having a significant impact on the environment. So with that, staff does recommend that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution approving the design review, use permit, and lot merger as described on the screen. And that concludes my presentation. Just shy of 30 minutes. I appreciate you all, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Evan. Questions for staff from the commissioners? Commissioner Delves?
So, to my recollection, the Planning Commission has not seen this project.
Not in this form, no. In 2019, the Planning Commission did see another project that was titled the J.B. Pasteur Building. It was for one lot on Lot 10, but not in this form or capacity. You are
Okay.
correct.
So 4 of the 5 of us, well, 3 of the 4 of us here tonight certainly have never seen it. It has a long history, but it actually hasn't come to the Planning Commission.
Correct, yes.
And the fact that it has this long history and went through our colleagues at the Historic Resource Board and City Council, their documents, their resolutions essentially would leave us some breadcrumbs to follow, I think. Can you pull up the 2023-099 City Council resolution? You had it in our packet.
Yes, I'll just need 1 minute, but I can get that for you.
Thanks. While you're doing that, this is more of a statement than a question, but it's kind of for the public's benefit. We do have a document that was provided in our packet, and this gets to CEQA and Ian's admonishment that perhaps we should be more focused on CEQA. I think he's right. The document is 10 or 12 pages long. It was prepared by staff that makes the point that, well, yes, this is subject to CEQA just like everything is, but that the staff has gone through the appropriate process that is required of a project under CEQA. I do think that before we get to a final decision on this project, that we should go through that document. I'm going to not ask to do it right now because I think we want to deal with the merits of the project before we get to that. But I think it's a good idea, and the work has been done. I would also ask that the city attorney have a look at it and give us an opinion on it. And can you go down to the findings?
Commissioner Delps, make sure you use your mic.
Sorry, could you go down to the findings, please?
What page is that? Do you know what page that is?
So I'm looking at attachment, just for anyone following along, this is attachment 8. It includes all of the previous resolutions by the City Council as well as the Historic Resources Board. And this is page 4. The City Council findings start on page 4.
And then just go down a little further, 6.3A. would you mind reading the council finding there, A?
The proposed new construction will destroy historic materials if the wall is moved from its intended position. The spatial relationship that brings light and space to the entire complex are a character-defining feature of the resource, will be forever dwarfed by the overly large and looming structure in the adjoining buildings. The bank building and community room were designed to be viewed from all 4 sides. Further, the complex exists on a corner in the downtown area, and the environment that surrounds the building, including such landscape features, are also important. The ornamented concrete wall is significant for both its spatial significance on the site as well as the artistic value.
Can you go down to then number 11? And I'm sorry to do this, Dave, but would you mind reading that?
Sure, not at all. The size of the proposed project itself demeans the existing savings and loan complex by not changing it, but rather by minimizing it into less significance. The proposed project does not subordinate to the complex, but actually overwhelms it and confuses the composition of the entire block.
And then also number 12, please.
The proposed project does not respect the space of the environment, and the project needs to be modified so that the bank building and community room maintain their spatial relationships and are not subordinated by the proposed development.
So thanks. And I asked for that because I'm looking for, are these breadcrumbs that were left to us by City Council, and are they meaningful? And are they saying, what was that in response to? What was, and is it talking to us now?
It is, and so taking the resolution as a whole, so these are breadcrumbs, as you put it. These were the findings that the City Council had of the project that they reviewed that went from the Historic Resources Board to City Council, okay, which is not the project you have in front of you at the time. Where this resolution goes further, and what came out of that City Council meeting most notably was the creation of this preservation buffer that has been shown on the plans. And so I believe, Evan, if you want to show the end of the resolution where there now therefore be it resolved, and they make the determination that it is consistent. So then the City Council issued a determination of consistency with the Secretary of Interior standards for the construction of mixed-use building with subterranean garage on a portion of the Northern California Savings and Loan Site. This determination of consistency is further predicated on the following recommendations and draft conditions of approval being incorporated into the project and accepted and approved by the City of Carmel-by-the-Sea Planning Commission as part of the discretionary permit and approval for this project. So what this is saying to you, keeping with your breadcrumb theme, is that the City Council said, the project we just looked at, not consistent. It does all those things we just said. It demeans the site, it's too large. However, the City Council felt with the application of these, and what was the term that they used, Evan? Sorry. The recommendations and draft conditions, with the application of those and approval and acceptance by the Planning Commission of those, that it would then be consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards. So the project that they saw was not. Application of these conditions would make it consistent.
And then, just to clarify, the staff felt like this did achieve what the council was directing the applicant to do.
That's what our recommendation is that they, the preservation buffer was a physical limitation put around the resource, and then the building, as you've seen, does meet that line.
Somewhere it was stated the preservation barrier is a minimum. I saw that a couple times. I'm not remembering where I saw it. Well, it was in this presentation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it is a minimum. Yeah. So, interpreting what's on the plans, ultimately that's our recommendation to you. But the resolution coming from the council gives deference to the Planning Commission. So that's why we're here.
Okay.
If you, as a Planning Commission, you need to decide that these conditions, as applied on the revised project that you have in front of you, meet the test that they were trying to do.
But we need to make findings to do that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions from the commission for the staff? Okay, before we begin the applicant's presentation and the public comments, I want to explain the time allowances. I'll allow 5 minutes for the initial presentation from the applicant, 3 minutes for the public's comments, and then I will allow the applicant additional time at the end of the comments to answer questions or comments that are made by the public that need clarification. So at this time, I want to invite the applicant or the applicant's architect to come forward and make their presentation to the commission and the public.
Good afternoon, Planning Commissioners, Chair LePage, and Planning staff. Before I start, can I request extra time?
Yes, how much time do you think you need for your
Probably
presentation?
another 3-4 minutes from my 5 minutes, about total of 9 minutes.
So 9 minutes?
Yes.
All right, well, I'll give you 10 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you. Joining me via Zoom today is Patrice Pastor and Chris Mitchell. They'll in and out of the Zoom meeting. And with me today is Ryan Eisherman of Esperanza Carmel.
June, do we need, I'm sorry to interrupt you, do we need to elevate Mr. Pastor and Mr. Mitchell? Because they're on Zoom right now, not as panelists, I'm assuming. So they're joining via Zoom. Are they going to speak during your presentation?
No, not
Okay,
at this
thank
time.
you.
They're just
Thank
here
you.
to listen.
Thank you.
I'll let you know if they decide to speak. First of all, I want to thank Evan and Brandon for working with us with our team. Since the project's inception in 2019, it's been 6 years with various city council, planning commission, and HRB hearings. Historicity has been thoroughly discussed in these hearings, and the city council has given their decision and direction to us by a planning staff. The proposed project were designed to adhere to the required preservation buffer. So the red line represents the preservation buffer. We believe the intent of the buffer is to maintain and preserve distance and space from these resources. The proposed trash enclosure is in the rear of the property. The bins itself is outside the preservation buffer. The trash enclosure is about 46 feet from the community building and 21 feet from the bank building. Only a portion of that trash enclosure, actually the gate, part of the gate is encroaching into the preservation buffer. But our intent is to use material using the same wood fence adjacent to it. So again, we're talking of one section of the gate, and there will be a fence along the property line, which I know is allowed by code. So, next one, please, Evan. Oh no, stay there, please. The commercial area are pedestrian friendly in design and experience. They are accessed at 2 points along Dolores. One will be along this area with steps going into the commercial area, and then another one here next to the community building. There'll be a driveway here going to the parking area in the ground floor. The proposed project have a setback of 12 feet from the ornamented wall, whereas we're required to have 5 feet from the preservation buffer. Unit 106 have a 2'6" setback from the ground floor and a 5-foot setback from this apartment level. The intent of that is to keep an open space in this area to be subservient to Unit 107, which is the community building. Next one, please. FAR allowed for this project is 16,200 square feet. Our proposal is only 13,428. Building lot coverage is allowed is 9,600. The proposed is 9,242. This diagram shows distinctly 5 buildings. All of them are under 10,000. The biggest building is 9,466, which is this building and this building. By doing so, it creates a feel and sense of open space throughout. Next one, please. The proposed second floor balcony and courtyard, which is these areas, is a non-conditioned space, and it will have a roof overhang. The intent is for practical use of the apartment tenants, especially as they ascend from the elevator and the stairs to their units, to kind of protect them from the weather. And this open space balcony is visually accessible from public ways. The balcony and courtyard are for exclusive and common space for the apartments. The east side of the proposed apartment fenestrations are minimal. Only windows that are required for bedroom egress and high windows for bathrooms. We are proposing to use obscured glass, and you can see here obscured glass, but the true background is this. So the intent is not only for the apartment, but also the existing neighbor apartment. There's about 4-foot setback from the property line to our proposed apartment. Apartment 2D does not have any neighbor in the adjacent property, so there'll be no obscure glazing in this unit. Next one, please. So the proposed project architecture is shepherded by the commercial design guidelines. The overall concept stayed true to the 2019 concept as initially reviewed by the Planning Commission, maintaining good design precepts, thus improving the overall project and its site surroundings. We're using materials and finishes that creates a village feel. For roof, we have an option of, in some of the buildings where we have what you call a Roman cap and pan, where the top is barreled and the bottom line is flat, and your traditional clay cap and pan roof. So we intermix that, and the same is true with our window fenestration. As you can see here, this is this green color, and this is this rust color for this building. Creates interest. And then we also are using 2 paint colors and natural stone, and we have accents of decorative ceramic tile for the planters. Next, please. So use of different materials, finishes, coloration, and texture, creating individuality, interest, and interest between buildings. And on this side, it shows the relationship between the two neighbors. So we have 4 feet from the property line to this to the building. And like I said earlier, we're using obscured glass, and we position these windows offset from the known openings of the existing apartment. Next, please. This is the Stonehouse Terrace, the Reimer Stonehouse Terrace on San Carlos. This is the significant facade of this potential historic resource. As you can see, it has the proposed J.B. Pastor building has no impact to this potential resource. This is the site facing the J.B. Pastor property. Majority of it is a blank wall, retaining wall. And again, this is a significant site. This is the staking relationship between the existing apartment and our proposed building. Next, please. Architectural styles in the immediate vicinity of the proposed project is a mix of eclectic influence of Northern and Southern European architecture. So our proposed project fits in this genre of architecture. And then next, please. Here's 3D rendering of the proposed project. This is from Dolores Street looking northwest, as shown by Evan earlier. This is the opposite side looking southwest. And this one shows it along 7th with the outdoor seating of the restaurant in the foreground. Next, please. There was a discussion of the courtyard in the community building. This is the existing condition of the community building courtyard. There's already existing planters and seating areas already in place. Public comments were addressed in this presentation. Technical aspects, I think, were addressed by Evan. Thank you for your time, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Was there a specific inspiration for the architecture?
Excuse me?
Was there a specific inspiration for the architecture?
We're guided by the commercial guidelines. So what we try to do is not do a Disneyland style architecture. We want to be purist in our style and our design, to use of proportioned fenestrations and finishes, including texture.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Okay. Were there any other questions for the architect? Okay. At this time, I'd like to invite members of the public to come forward and make their comments.
Good evening. My name is Steve Hilliard, and I have submitted written comments regarding several issues presented by the approval process that the city employs for this project. I use the staff report as the factual basis for those comments. I concluded that the city's process is faulty in several respects, but in this brief time that I have, I cannot explain those observations. I will leave that to the paper. However, I do want to discuss the role of processes in design review, because a sound process will result in a robust consideration of a project and will result in a fair determination of its approvability. State law dictates the general process for the city must follow during design review. It's called CEQA. The city can supplement CEQA, but it cannot ignore it or act inconsistent with it. In the paper, I explain how the city ignored explicit timelines that must be followed at the beginning of the design review, and how it proposes to act inconsistently with the CEQA for determining the project's CEQA status. The paper also briefly draws attention to the law of statutory interpretation, which provides a rigorous process for determining the council's intent if it enacts a seemingly ambiguous ordinance. Excuse me. I distinguish this from adopting an arbitrary interpretation to accommodate a particular design element. I recommend that you embrace these and other applicable processes as welcome support in your quasi-judicial role. The city's general plan, zoning code, and design guidelines provide excellent resources for assuring that our city retains its unique character. If you match these resources with the obligatory processes mentioned above, you are sure to reach an appropriate and defensible decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ian Martin. The proposed J.B. Pasteur building is a single structure under the law, as all of its parts are connected together, and therefore nearly 3,000 square feet too big by law. So the municipal code defines structure as, and I quote, a stable assembly of parts. Okay, a stable assembly of parts. Municipal Code 17-1440, paragraph C says, no single structure shall contain more than 10,000 square feet of floor area. The next sentence has to do with open space, but there is no qualifier like the word however. So the law is clear. No single structure shall contain more than 10,000 square feet of floor area. So if you have any doubt about how to interpret that law, look to the general plan, which is clear that Carmel-by-the-Sea is a small, human-scale village that should have small, human-scale buildings. The proposed building is definitely not small or human-scale, and is therefore in conflict with the law and the general plan. Another point, the commercial design guidelines state, and again I quote, new buildings should not imitate styles of the past, but strive to achieve compatibility with the old, unquote. The proposed building violates both of those directives, As you can see from the story poles and the plans, there is no effort to relate the proposed building to the 7th and Dolores building, and it's certainly imitating a style of the past. The Spanish style of architecture has become commonplace all over California, appearing in the form of shopping centers, hotels, and all sorts of other commercial buildings. It is a formula. Adding more to our village here is a formula to become Anywhere USA or Anywhere California. What's more, having a blend of different architectural styles is important to our community character. Adding even more Spanish-style buildings, especially large ones, threatens that balance. There are at least 14 Spanish-style buildings within a block radius of the proposed buildings. We should not add more. My third point is that this needs to be reviewed by the Historic Resources Board, not only for its impacts on the 7th and Dolores building, but on Raymer Stonehouse Terrace, which was designed by Olaf Dahlstrand, an architect and community leader who is mentioned in our historic context statement 16 times. Yes, the building is 2 years shy of being 50 years old, but Municipal Code 1732-040, paragraph H, makes clear that turning 50 is not a hard and fast requirement if other factors are met, which they are. Again, Dahlstrand is mentioned in the historic context statement 16 times. HRB needs to review this proposed development as it would hide a whole elevation of one of Dahlstrand's major buildings behind a wall. So this
Ian,
needs to be
can you summarize?
Okay.
Thank
This
you.
needs to be redesigned to be smaller, to be a different architectural style, and to integrate with neighboring buildings, and it needs HRB review. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ian. Okay, the next speaker would like to come forward in the chamber. No other, oh, here we go.
So sorry, I thought it would have been a big line. Rich Pepe, thank you so much. First of all, I really want to thank staff, and good evening, commissioners and staff, and people in the audience. Great staff report, lengthy at best, and thank you for everybody in the Zoom world. If Mr. Pastor and his team is there, welcome. If I were in your shoes, for me, I personally would not be satisfied with the parking element of this. And sitting in the audience, I read the staff report, viewed the building. I know a lot about cars, and I know a lot about parking. It's going to be one of our hot topics coming up real soon. Now, we just concluded the police station. We just concluded street numbers. We just concluded the housing element. You know, parking management is coming up next. So little quick history, if you don't know, and maybe you do. We had the bank building for many, many years. Then it became a furniture store. Then it was vacant. Then it became an event center, which was required to have, sorry, I'm going to have to talk fast. I think it was upwards of 30 parking spaces. Little by little, that was chewed away, all right? Now it become a restaurant, which was required, at one moment, was required to have parking spaces. Now apparently the lot is either was subdivided, it's a different lease, and that restaurant's going to lose all its parking. So my first question is, will that become non-conforming at that moment, or is that not a requirement anymore? There's going to be a big parking impact. Would you mind? Can this be put up on the screen, real quickly? I'm not going to go over my 3 minutes, I promise. As they're doing that, the scissor lift proposal. I've seen that in a lot of cities. My city where I'm originally from uses them, but only for valet and or if it's your own house where you have 2 cars in your own garage. I have some exotic cars, and I know how those things work. They're not meant for two different families using them. They're not meant to come and go all day long. We all move our cars 5 times a day, go to the store, go to work, go to our gyms, etc. They're not really meant for that. They're fraught with problems. They're dangerous. At least, all right? It's like going onto when you get your car towed away, you got about 1.5 feet on each side. They're very tricky to use. I'm not satisfied with that personally. And then the last question is, I would like to see that council and the staff, commissioners, talk about this in lieu parking thing. If you can develop a property to, lot line to lot line and just pay your way out of parking, we're going to have some problems in the future. A lot of these older buildings can be redeveloped, and if all you have to do, and we're trying to build housing, and I'm all for downtown housing, okay? Please, you know that. But if all you need to do is buy your way out of with the in lieu parking, which is, I don't know where it really goes. There's a finite number. Brandon sent me the Walker study a few weeks ago. There's a finite number of parking spaces in town, and if we keep crowding up this town and buying our way out of parking spaces, it's really not going to be fun to live here much anymore. So I really want to thank you for all you do, and please consider my comments about the parking. Again, for me, I'm not really satisfied with how this is working on the parking.
Thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker, please come forward.
Carol Hall, commissioners, staff. I wrote a rebuttal to part of what Ian Martin stated tonight, and I assume that you got that about the design. And I won't repeat that because you already received it. But also in terms of discussion about CEQA and EIR, I was here until midnight last night. You were not. Brandon was. We had a long discussion, and it was pretty ridiculous that it all went that long. But as you know, probably the appeal to have an EIR on the Hofs's house was denied by the council. I probably agree that an EIR should have been done for the pit building before it was destroyed or demolished. Probably should have been done for Hofs's, and probably should be done for this project as well. But that's not what was decided, and Brandon stood up for their decisions in that regard, that there was no evidence that it was required. So I'm hoping that there's not a decision that this particular project requires an EIR when the Hofs's house does not, because that is called discrimination and would be evidence for a lawsuit, in my estimation. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. The next speaker, come forward, please.
Hello, commissioners. Victoria Beach. Finally, we get to see this project in the whole. There's been so many violations leading up to this that we haven't been able to yet. Those have been litigated. I would argue this building, of all the ones that have been mentioned today already, is probably forming the most important test of our regulations and our processes that is before the city at the moment. I'm probably the only other architect in the room, and I'm probably going to go over, and I beg your indulgence, but you may not give it, I understand. Bob Delves went well through the consistency with conditions requirement that you all need to review. The conditions were that to consider, the complaints, the findings were that this is a four facade building, that the buildings that were proposed were dominating it, and that the buffer that was proposed was just, I was there, and off the cuff, that is a minimum. But the main thrust of that was you need to preserve the spatial relationships that are there, and you need to fix the siting issues, and they threw it back to you guys to do it. So look at those conditions as Bob pointed you toward, and look at the full interior standards of the Secretary of Interior, which is also in that packet that I gave you. They require, because it's not up, I'll talk about this first. This is the four facades. The four facades are, in my view, very difficult to put in a hierarchy. I think we saw that on the site today. if I quizzed you all, which one is the front? I think the answer would be all of the above, and it's very hard to distinguish that, and I just think these elevations make that clear. Sorry, I gotta flip the page. Again, there's so much here because it's the first hearing of this. So we are required to maintain the Secretary of Interior standards because this is on a historic property. We saw the boundaries of that today. The original historic function of the bank is a drive-through teller bank. It is a suburban setting intentionally. It was the age of the automobile. This is why that looks like it does. You must respect this original siting of the building, and it literally says there, if it was an open space around it to begin with.
Victoria, can I just, it seems to me like you're going to need more than 3 minutes.
Yeah,
So how much time do you think you need?
maybe 5.
Okay, I'm going to give you 6 minutes.
You're sweet.
All right, because you've done a lot of work here, and
I know,
I want you to be able to present it.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
So if the building is designed to be in an open space, it must remain in an open space. I'll get to the good news later on that. If it is suburban in nature, it needs to remain suburban in nature. If there are other, we talked about this on the site, but if there are separate structures, you cannot put stuff in between separate historic structures to block them from one another. This project clearly does. And CEQA has come up today, and I disagree with Carol Hall because the aspect of CEQA that applies to this project was not ever debated yet, ever, in this body, in the council. I've never in my time here heard it debated. And the CEQA provision that applies is 15.300.2.f. A categorical exemption shall not be used for a project that may cause a substantial adverse change in the significance of a historical resource. This project could come to a point where it may not, there's no chance that it could have a substantial adverse impact, but it certainly may cause one now. So that's the CEQA provision that's unique to this, not the projects that we've been talking about so far in the City Council chambers. So I wanted to go briefly to the staff evaluations. It's also in your packet. Not your packet. I want to elevate my handout to a packet. In your handout, the staff concludes, as I think Bob has already alluded to, that because the minimum preservation buffer has been preserved, that throwaway, let's start with 5 feet, guys, at least, that somehow the preservation of the spatial relationships has been preserved. I believe that is not a logical conclusion. The staff analysis is that the project is now subordinated to the existing historic buildings there. I don't see that. That is a Council Condition 3, preservation of the site context. The staff also suggests, as others have said, that you might want to consider calling the way that you get into these upper apartments not a structure. That is not possible by just the English language. Anything that gets you, that you have to walk up a stair and walk along to get into an apartment, that's a structure, and it is attached to the structure, and it makes it more than 10,000 square feet. So the good news there is that we can actually solve a lot of problems at the same time. This applicant must substantially reduce the size of this project just by virtue of the last thing I just said, the 10,000 square foot problem. We also saw on the site today that the commercial character of Dolores is primarily a single storefront and then some residential behind, not a mall-type, multi-commercial fronts and walkways to connect them. So that gives us the opportunity to repeat that same commercial pattern, as we must, drastically reduce, in other words, no housing impact, but reduce the scale through the reduction of commercial space. Then, in addition, because we observed the other eligible historical property behind, that's a 15-foot parapet wall, as we saw. The back of this project could be brought down to below 15 feet. If it wants to still be more than 1 story, that part can be suppressed. It could also therefore go back to a parking solution that addresses some other comments today. And then the 2-story portion would remain up on the non-historic portion, on the other side of the historic boundary, and perhaps overlapping just enough to maintain the Teller drive-through Teller historic status there. So, and then just speaking as an architect for a moment, the compression, the removal of those exterior open spaces, those fake open spaces that are meant to make it look like different buildings, if those were removed, then those buildings could slide over and become compressed further away from the building, from the historic resources. So thank you for your indulgence there, Chair, and that's all I have to say for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, do we have some other speakers here come forward?
Christy Ramers. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to walk through my home today. It's very difficult to really see the impacts of a wall to the west until you're inside the apartment and can witness that our architect Olaf Dahlstrand designed this residence with a complete west-facing plan. Ever since the flagging went up last week, I have felt incredible anxiety and, to be honest, grief at the notion of having the home I have lived in for almost 2 decades turn into a cave. The Stonehouse Terrace is my family's building. It was once a cottage where the restaurant is now, where my father and uncle grew up. When my grandparents passed, my father encouraged my uncle to keep the property so that it could be transformed into the little shopping courtyard with our 2 residences in the back. My father and uncle had tremendous pride not only in the little home they grew up in, but also their Norwegian heritage, and for that reason they chose a fellow Scandinavian, an architect they greatly admired, Olaf Dahlstrand, to design our building. Dahlstrand is written about 16 times in our own historic context statement, and our building is very close to turning 50 years old. The Ramers family intends to apply for the historic register. As we have already heard this evening, the exemptions for CEQA shall not be used for a project that may cause substantial adverse change in the significance of a historic resource. This project, as it stands, will cause a substantial adverse change in 2 historic resources, one actual and one eligible. I hope you are all able to read my family's request also for an EIR. The City Council in their resolution asks for this building to follow the Secretary of Interior standards. The applicable standards to follow are the new construction within the boundaries of historic properties. Because 2 of the 3 lots for this building are deemed historic and are part of the bank complex, which as a unit is historic. Additionally, these standards need to be reviewed in the context of the Ramers Stonehouse Terrace. There's a lot that's in the packet from Victoria, but some of the few that I thought fit were protecting the historic setting and context of the property, including the degree of open space and building density must always be considered. And then also the one where the building is now pushed back and has a preservation buffer. It's pushed away, but it's not subordinate. It's not any lower than I remember it from the previous plan that went to the City Council. Because there are so many standards that have been missed with this design, and because of our intention to register the building, our building, this new design needs to be seen by the Historic Resource Board. And an EIR is essential for the preservation of both resources. I am not against housing. This project could be done in a way that achieves housing while preserving the important view sheds of our historic buildings. We need an EIR and the Historic Resource Board to help us achieve that marriage. In closing, I can't express the level of pride I have in our building. I live there, I have a business there. I learned to have great pride in the building from my father, and seeing what may happen to what he loves so much has filled me with so much sadness. I don't want to live in a cave. And I also thought we didn't do this to each other in Carmel. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker, please.
members of the Planning Commission. My name is Mike Brown, and I just learned about this a couple of days ago, this project. Went down there, and I was absolutely amazed at how high and dense this project is. I want to look at this closer. I was hoping at the meeting today to learn a lot more, but what I have heard, what Ian Martin had to say, what Victoria Beach had to say, what Christy Reber had to say, and what Pepe had to say about parking, especially. 1 month you go to a city council meeting, all about parking. Go to the next meeting, it's all about housing. Next meeting, all about parking again. This parking and housing thing gets, especially parking, bounced back and forth so much. This is a case where you really got to look closer, I think, at what is being done. And thank you, Pepe, for the comments you made, plus everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Chairman LePage, members of the Commission, city staff. My name is Cindy Lloyd. Carmel means many things to many people. Residents, visitors, shop owners, builders, city administration, members of council, boards, and commissions. An irrefutable definition eludes us. Each of us defines Carmel depending upon when we first came to live here, became involved, and started protecting her. My family came to Carmel in 1911. I was lucky to have been born in Carmel in 1914, when it was a small village. In my 82 years, my Carmel has slowly eroded as houses have replaced open space, developments have replaced artichoke fields, roads have widened, and the seasonal tourists are now daily visitors. The clock cannot be turned back, but we who love and care for Carmel can and must protect her. In 1976, a corner restaurant in Carmel was threatened by a plan to convert its single-story building into two. Led by a man who protested the plan, he and others who frequented the gathering spot formed a group called Carmel Today. That man was my father, Frank Lloyd. The group morphed into Carmel Heritage. My mother, Marjorie Lloyd, the unofficial Carmel historian, was a member of the first board of directors. The building plan was dropped. Today, we still enjoy the open patio dining space and low profile of Hugh Comstock's Village Corner Restaurant. In 1979, a nursery business on Dolores Street closed. Two Carmel women developed an idea that the small spot would make a welcomed park. The mayor at the time favored development, but a woman member of the council favored a park. Never underestimate the power of 3 determined women. Because of their vision and persuasion, we enjoy the open space and garden of Piccadilly Park. Filling in each available piece of open space with tall buildings is not the Carmel way. Deviating from 2-story height limits and the streetscape rhythm of roof lines is not the Carmel way. We who value the Carmel we know and love must protect her, not just for us, but for the generations following us. You, the members of our Planning Commission, have the ability to maintain Carmel's character or to change it. The rules, regulations, codes, policies, and the indefinable sense of Carmel's character guide you. I was born into a family who spoke out protecting Carmel. My dad served on the city council. My mom was an editor of the Carmel Pinecone. My late brother and I have embraced our familial responsibilities to do what we can to preserve the Carmel we love. Sorry, Christy, you started it. Thank you for doing what you can to protect our Carmel.
Thank you, Cindy. Okay, the next speaker, please. I don't see anybody coming up, so are we have any online hands up?
There's no hands online.
Okay, last call from the public. Nobody want to come up? I had a question for June. You want to come up? You may want some follow-up time anyhow. I had a question for you. Can you come on up?
Yes, sir.
My question was, did you make a 3D digital model for this project in your drawings?
Not the 3D, no.
Okay, all right. Did you want additional time to make any additional comments?
Yes.
Okay,
I can respond
go ahead.
to some of them. Most of them has been addressed by staff report. One of them is the balcony on the second floor. Again, it's a common space, an open walkway, open visually. We will defer to the planning commissioner's decision based on the staff report on which way to go in that. Regarding large scale, as I said earlier, this proposed project is way under the allowable FAR and way under the allowable lot coverage. We design it such that we don't have blocks of spaces, so we can create feeling of smaller buildings. We don't have any blank walls. All walls have fenestration and has character, so you don't end up with the blank except for that one retaining wall on the south because of the neighbor to the north, to the south. As far as parking is concerned, I'll defer to the Planning Commission and staff on how to address that. Regarding the historic building, we all know it's historic, hence we went through several historic board meetings, city council meetings, and several historic consultants. In fact, in the historic consultant, when we got approval from HRB, it was determined that the larger building meets the historic code. And of course, as we know now, the city council appealed that decision and said, we don't agree with the HRB, we want you to come back. So we listened. They gave us a clear direction. We understand you cannot be arbitrary on what setback you have or how much distance you need to have. Hence, a preservation buffer was created. And at that hearing, we were clear, is this how we are going to approach this new design? So we complied with all the regulations, all the direction that has been given us the past 6 years. So we are just happy to be here today after 6 years, and hopefully the commissioners understand the merits of all this hard work that we prepared to comply with regulations and direction that were given to us. And with regards to the neighbor to the east, that's the reason we created the 4-foot setback. And we all know, and as I presented earlier, the significant facade of the Reimer's Stonehouse Terrace is on San Carlos. That's very beautiful, no question, and we're not even impacting that. Right now, if you go to the Esperanza Carmel property, all you see is a blank wall. We recognize there's an apartment. We strategically place these windows in our proposal so we are offset their windows. And on top of that, we minimize it enough to meet code requirement. In fact, we designed some of these units to not have windows facing that side. We're using obscured glass. We offset them so our windows are facing a blank wall, although we're proposing the obscured glass. And as far as high and dense, again, go back to FAR and lot coverage, we're under that. We're under in height. We're allowed 30 feet. And as Evan presented earlier, we're way under the allowable height. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, no hands up online? No one else in the chambers that wants to speak to the commission regarding this application? Okay, I'm going to close the public comments, bring it back to the commission for their discussion. I just want to make a quick comment, or actually want to ask the commissioners a question. We're being asked tonight to determine the impacts of these proposed buildings on a historic resource, historic building. And I find that very difficult to do without having a 3D digital model. And it's my feeling that without that, we cannot determine the impacts to the historic building and resources. We can't determine whether it's subordinate or not. The flagging just doesn't really accomplish that or represent that well. There's just way too much transparency to determine those types of decisions. So my question to my commissioners in their comments is, how do they feel about that? So with that said, I'd like to bring in the discussions. I'm going to start with Commissioner Delves, if she'd like to begin.
Thank you, Chairman. It's sort of deja vu all over again on this one. I'm feeling the same way I felt the first time I looked at the the Pitt project, the Ulrika Plaza project over 2 years ago, the first iteration that came back to us under the new ownership, and the applicant is the same applicant. So I'm going to reuse some of my comments, I think. Let's start by acknowledging the zoning. Here is SC, service commercial, and I'm not, these are my, it's a paraphrase, but service commercial is intended as a transition zone, and the language in the code basically says to transition from the higher intensity uses of the commercial core to the more less intense uses in the residential district. This proposal is pretty intense, and it's not contributing to a transition. The opposite. It's almost saying we're leaving the commercial center. Oh, no, we're not. This is a big building. It's got a lot of commercial use. It's got a lot of residential use. It is massive. It covers, well, let's start with is it 1 or is it 3 or is it 5 buildings? It is not 5 buildings. It's not, and just like the original, I'll stop going to that reference, but I do not believe this is one single building. I don't believe it's 5 buildings, and I believe it is at least one building that is more than 10,000 square feet. So just starting right there is something that would need to change. You pretty much go lot line to lot line to the maximum height that you can go. It will be a massive building. You've shown no respect for the neighbor behind you. A wall that's 4 feet away from the property line that completely eliminates, not just the view, but the sun and the air space. It's disrespectful to your neighbors, and you've shown no interest other than perhaps moving it from 2 feet to 4 feet. It's still a wall right in her nose. I think is lacking. Parking, I'm a no on parking for the in lieu. This building needs to park itself. And you have not demonstrated to me that you don't have options. You've basically just said, you've taken the fact that you're neighboring to a historic resource and use that as your excuse for not considering building parking below your structure. But you haven't shown me your work. You haven't demonstrated anything there. You've just kind of said not doing it. And you'd rather pay a fairly insignificant amount of money into the in lieu fee because that's going to pencil better for you. I look at this project and it looks like, and I've been a real estate developer, I understand that you are just trying to maximize your return on your investment. And you're going wall to wall, top to bottom, and deciding you're not going to spend any more money digging down to park your cars. And we have a parking problem, as Pepe suggests, exacerbated by the fact that this project is taking away an existing parking lot that is heavily used. I think you need to demonstrate, if you want to go with the in lieu, you're going to have to demonstrate more. I think the idea of these ramps or the lifts is a very bad idea. I don't know if we've done them anywhere else. The same way, I've seen them in people's garages or in very private settings, but not in a shared setting. And I think they're contraptions that are difficult for normal people to deal with. You also have an option that if you were to put a deed restriction on some of your residential units, a deed restricted unit only needs a half a space as opposed to a full space. And it could be a deed restriction that basically limits the occupancy to, it doesn't have to be low or very low. It could just be even at median income. And that would help the city deal with some other issues and solve your problem, your parking problem to some extent. To the 3D model, absolutely. I'm going to need to see a 3D model. And for me, if you come back with a 3D model of this proposal, I don't think I'm going to like it any better, because I still think it is massive. I do think it completely subordinates these historic structures. They'll go away, and this building is what you'll see. And I do go back to these breadcrumbs that were left to us by the City Council. And the one that gets me the most is that the historic resource was intended to be viewed from all four sides. And this takes away two of those sides completely, that you will no longer be able to see it. So I think you got a lot of work to do on this one. First, to respect the direction that was provided by City Council, and then secondly, to respect our zoning and our design guidelines. As to the whether it's Italianate or Mediterranean, I don't care as much. I would love to see something different, just because I think that neighborhood's already full of Mediterranean-looking buildings, and I'm open-minded on that one. June, if you're involved, I know that the fenestration and the details and the materials will be excellent, and so I believe you will come up with an authentic version of whatever style you choose, because you're good. So I'm not as concerned about that. To the point of the other thing I would ask for when we see this again, because I'm going to suggest we continue it, is that we do have the questions that were provided to us by Mr. Hilliard and others regarding CEQA, that we have answers to those, and that we actually do at that time go through the city's response to why we don't need an EIR or why we do. Because I'm agreeing with Carol that, that I think we've been through this on a couple of other projects. We have to be careful not to be discriminatory completely, and I would want to understand why, if an EIR is required, why, and otherwise just would look for the support of why it's not. That's all I got.
Thank you, Commissioner Dels. Commissioner Allen, would you like to make your comments this time?
Sure. I'll start off by saying that a 3D model would be extremely helpful, and I'm glad that you made the suggestion, because I really would like to be able to see how the buildings interact. And so I have several concerns. I share concerns about parking. I share concerns about the size, the spatial relationship with the historic buildings. I also share concerns over the fact that it doesn't appear to be 5 separate buildings, and I think that it needs to be separated. Also, I am concerned about the view and the light for the neighboring building, and then in terms of just the wishes that I have, I wish this was more creative. I wish that it was more thoughtful. I think Commissioner Delves kind of put into perspective, for me, this looks like a business transaction, whereas if they can maximize the space and utilize every single inch of this building for rental income or investment income, then they will do that. It doesn't appear that it was thoughtful in terms of how to put a building into our village. And then the last thing is that I wish that it was more considerate of both the space and the neighbors. So I have more concerns than I do in appreciations for this. And so I think we have some work to do.
Thank you, Commissioner Allen. Commissioner Karapetkoff, your comments, please.
Yes. I would like to say some good things about the project first and then move to the bad ones. I think June Solano did a good job redesigning the project. We look at the previous version, and the new version really does a better job protecting the historic elements of the complex, including the wall. We all know the whole story around the decorative wall. I remember that in the previous version, there was the idea to move the entire community center to the other side, and that idea got rejected, so they tried that. It didn't work out. I like that the building is of a mixed use. That's in line with other buildings in the neighborhood, so this is great that you can combine retail space with apartments. That is a great idea. It's a good approach to solving the housing issues in town. I have nothing specific against the Spanish colonial style. I mean, yes, there are a lot of buildings in that style. That whole corner is built that way. But I'm sure the quality of the execution will be excellent. I think the team was trying to do a good job protecting the historic elements in that part of town, but I agree with my fellow commissioners that the bulk and mass issue is still there. The new structure is overwhelming the entire area, and it is not going to be subordinate to the savings and loan complex. I have some issues with the whole concept of the parking being in the back, not underground, because it creates the need for this additional driveway that unfortunately goes right next to the decorative wall that is protected. And I'm trying to imagine, these big trucks, for example, trying to drive through this narrow space. The probability is pretty high that at some point somebody's going to hit that wall. So I would love to see an option to not have this driveway going into the other side, the deep side of the lot, explored underground, as we mentioned. That would probably solve some of these problems. And also, when we discussed the pit, we were talking about using alleyways to connect multiple streets. I wish there was a way to connect the back of the building to the 7th Street, not just to Dolores. Right now, all the entrances are from Dolores. But if there's a way to go behind the restaurant and connect to the 7th Street, that would be an interesting way of accessing the building as well, assuming that the trash containers will disappear underground where the parking is, right? That would be an interesting way to increase the, improve the flow in that whole area. We also, the impact on the Stonehouse Terrace. Definitely the 2 apartments upstairs are designed to look west. And if we put this massive building in front, they're going to lose not only the view, but also the access to natural daylight. There will be a severe impact on the whole experience being in these 2 apartments. And I appreciate that Christine invited us to have a look. So if it's possible to shift the mass, well, generally make the building lower, but also shift the mass maybe to the south where there is less of an issue. That would be probably a good way to protect the view, bring more or allow more sunlight into these apartments in the upper floor. And it will also avoid this problem where you have, newly built apartments looking into the existing apartments. Even though with a privacy glass, that's not a very pleasant situation to be in. What else can we explore? I talked about the alley, the underground parking, reducing the height, moving the mass to the south. I think these are the key points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Karapetkoff. As I began my discussion, we're being asked to determine the impacts on a historic building and historic resources. The council established a buffer zone, which the applicant has met, and I appreciate that. They've been through a process already, and the building does meet the standards, but to determine the impacts and the subordination, the only way we can do that is with a 3D digital model. And I think that's something that can be easily done with the CAD programs that are available to the architect. So I'm going to make a motion that we continue this item with the direction of the applicant that they provide us with a 3D digital model. Also, I want to highlight the comments, the direction that has been given to the applicant in terms of redesign. The building has a more than significant impact on the residential spaces on the, I think it's called the Stonehouse building. I mean, I was quite touched by the emotional response to the tenant there. I would feel the same way myself. I was shocked today when I went there and saw what the impacts would be onto that not only outdoor space, but the indoor space. So there needs to be a redesign to take into consideration to mitigate those impacts. The other, what were the other guidelines? I mean, the other direction that we heard? Parking, yeah, the parking, I think the applicant needs to explore underground parking. The in lieu of parking is I don't think, the staff went through the findings, but I think there can be some more exploration of that. That's the direction that has been given to the applicant. Any other direction that I've missed?
I forgot to say that in terms of the architectural style, I feel like it's redundant, since the architect didn't have any sort of inspiration for that, maybe they could look at thinking about something that might be unique to that area.
Yeah, I mean, that's right adjacent to a historic district, and that historic district is comprised mostly of Mediterranean style. There's some, what do you call it? British style. I mean, there's a real mix in there. I personally, I understand the argument about diluting particular styles of architecture, but in my mind, the way you do not dilute a particular style of architecture is by enriching it. And I'm a little concerned about the 3D rendering that was provided. I don't think that it has enough detail. Specifically, what I'm referring to is around the arches. The arches do not have a molded plaster detail, which I find that enriches those arches. Around the balcony, the front edge of the balcony should express molded details which you see on Mediterranean buildings. The ends of the corbels are just rounded off. If you look at Mediterranean architecture, you see very elaborate detailing on the ends of the corbels. These are the types of things that enrich and make a particular style of architecture more authentic, that connects it to the past. And I don't see those on the rendering. Could just be a situation where whatever rendering program you're using doesn't enable you to create these moldings, but that's what I would be looking for. You know, it is a historical style of that particular area. It is a historical style of our particular areas. I mean, you know, at large in the commercial district. I don't think a contemporary building down there is going to work because it's so close to this historic district, and it needs to be a reflection of that. It's got to make a strong connection to that. There's a couple of buildings that went into that district. One of them I sat on the review, and I'm not proud that we okayed it. I think it just doesn't fit in. It doesn't reflect that. So that's what I think needs to make the building applicable, to make it connect to that context, and I think that's the direction. You know, that I heard. So, we're always looking for authenticity, more detailing, drawing specific, connections to the strongest period of a particular style of architecture. That's what you want to do. You don't want to dilute it down by just, using stucco. The stucco has to have a lot of articulation. It has to have moldings. Whatever your materials you're using, they have to have a strong connection or an expression of craftsmanship, of hand craftsmanship. The materials are worked by the human hand, and what they reflect is not machinery. They reflect the actual individual expression of the artist. And that's what we want to look for. And that's the highest standard that this community has always reflected and should continue to maintain the authenticity of the community, the quality of the community, which all of us really, that's what we all recognize. We all don't want to be diluted. We want that to be continually expressed in our community. So that's a very long-winded motion.
So, Mr. Chair, I heard a couple of other things on there, and I'll ask the council or the commission. I also heard Commissioner Delves ask to make sure we answer questions that we heard about CEQA when we come back to you, which Mr. Court did include a very thorough attachment, but we'll make sure that answers all those questions if they're not in there right now. And then also answer questions from Mr. Hilliard's letter and any other letters that we got, some of which were answered in Evan's presentation today, but we'll make sure we have more of a question and answer type of situation. The other thing that I wanted to throw in there and make sure to remind you all, we did also receive a letter, like I mentioned, from the California Housing Defense Fund. In that letter, they do make statements that the current housing law, does not allow you to make discretionary decisions. So we talked about, the style of the architecture or, consistency with buildings around it. Those are somewhat discretionary decisions. And so we need to get an answer to this. So our attorney's here. We haven't had a chance to fully run that down yet. We tried to get that done before, but we'll come back with those answers too. My hope is that, obviously we can retain our discretionary decisions on that. So that was a very late hit letter that we got from, and just so everybody knows, Cal Housing Defense Fund is not the state of California. They're an advocacy group who looks for opportunities to push housing projects through and get sort of discretionary decision making out of the way. So it's not the state. It's an advocacy group that uses state law as a tool. So we need to dig into all the code sections that they gave us. So we'll come back to you next time with that determination as well.
And by passing a motion continues, that will give you time to do that.
It will, thank you, yes.
Okay, so.
You made the motion, I'll second it.
All right, so we have a motion that's been made and seconded. Any more discussion? No. Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Delves?
Yes.
Commissioner Karapetkov?
Yes.
Chair LePage?
Yes, the motion is carried. Okay, I'm going to call a 10-minute recess this time, so we can kind of stretch our legs and take care of whatever else we need to do. We will reconvene at, let's make it at 6:35. Okay.
That was good.
Well, that thing needed to continue.
Very infrequently, but yeah. How's you doing, Rich?
I'm okay. Yeah, everything's great. Thank you.
Great.
Probably other projects, fun.
I'm slowing down so much.
I'm trying to.
Well, I can't. It's happening.
Yeah. Looking up here, I was like, ouch.
That in my ears. I mean, I can't hear a damn thing. Yeah.
Hey, Chef, thank you for coming. Thank you.
See you there, Michael. Thank you for coming. I'm not sick, by the way. Dorothy is. Like, I don't want to bring her sick. You're a little germ. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys coming. I was telling Christy and Victoria. I was telling Christy and Victoria.
Go in here and get out of here.
Yes, please.
All right. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting back to order. Actually, we need to wait for staff. Here they come. Here they come. And the public, too. You need to get in your seats. All right, we'll call the meeting back to order. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Delves?
Yes, here.
Commissioner Karapetkov?
Yeah.
Chair LePage?
Here.
And Commissioner Locke is absent.
All right, okay. Back to the public hearings here. Get on the right page. All right. So the next item on the public hearings tonight is item number 6. This is DS 24096. This is the Camus and Mayrose project. It's consideration of a concept design study for the demolition of an existing single-family residence and construction of a new 2-story single-family residence located on Santa Fe Street, 3 northeast of 5th Avenue. We have the staff report, please.
Great, thank you, Chair LePage. Just gonna wait a second for the screen to switch over.
Okay.
Can we get the PowerPoint on display, or is that me? Is that me? There you go. There we go. Beautiful. Okay. Well, good afternoon. The next item on your agenda is a concept design study for the Carmel-by-the-Sea project. So the project is located on Santa Fe, 3 northeast of 5th Avenue. This provides a little bit of context of the project location, which is outlined in red. To the north of the project site where you see the V, those are vacant lots. And then to the right of the project site, where it says EN, is for the east neighbor. And we're gonna talk a little bit about the view that we saw today from their perspective on the tour. So the project is a demolition of an existing single-story, single-family cottage. It's about a little over 600 square feet and was constructed in 1937. The property also contains a detached garage and then a workshop attached to the rear of the garage. So all of these structures are proposed to be demolished. And the applicant is looking to construct a new 2-story single-family dwelling of 1,575 square feet. The dwelling would have an attached garage at the southwest corner, and then also an attached accessory dwelling unit on the first floor at the northwest corner. And as you know at this point, accessory dwelling units are exempt from discretionary review, but because it is attached to the home, you will see it as part of the overall project. So with respect to forest character, there are 17 trees either on or immediately adjacent to the project site. Most of them are Monterey cypress. There's 6 also coast live oak. All of them have been rated significant except for one. which is in the public right-of-way at the front of the property. No trees are proposed for removal, so the development has been designed around the on-site trees 5 and 6, and there's no replanting recommended due to the current tree density. With respect to mass and bulk, the exterior doors are proposed to be 7 feet tall. The upper level windows in the living and dining room, which are on the west and south elevations, are proposed to be 6 feet tall. And what you're seeing here is the south elevation. The windows on the upper level primary bedroom, which is at the rear of the home or off to the right, those windows are 4 feet 8 inches tall. The remaining windows on the north and east elevations are a little bit shorter at 3 feet 6 inches. As you can see in the renderings, none of the windows contain divisions, so staff has included a draft condition that divisions be incorporated into the windows, and that also the applicant look at reducing the height of the windows to be more human scale. The building form is a simple L shape with one front and one side facing gable. The roof pitch is 4 and 12, and the eave depth is minimal at about 7 inches. The gutters are proposed to be a galvanized bent metal. On top of the attached garage is a 150 square foot roof deck, which would be surrounded by a glass railing. The deck railing is set back 5 feet from the front of the garage and a little over 2.5 feet from the side of the garage. And the applicant is proposing some plantings in those setback areas. Staff has not heard from the south neighbor, but wanted to do a little additional analysis to try to ascertain whether the roof deck might have a privacy impact on the south neighbor. Staff estimates the deck is about 7 feet 9 inches from the property line and about 17 feet 10 inches from the south neighbor's house. Staff concluded that it's not likely that there would be a privacy impact. There's also minimal windows on the south neighbor's north elevation, although there are some windows towards the rear, but they may, it doesn't appear that they overlap with the deck. And again, staff has not been contacted by the south neighbor. No specific concerns have been raised at this point. The east neighbor did raise a concern about a potential ocean view impact. So I'm just going to go through some of the applicable design guidelines that speak to views. So in our residential design guidelines, section 5.0, important views of the ocean are recognized, and protecting them is also an important community concern. The desire to maximize view opportunities from the project site must be balanced with respecting the views of others. And the guidelines encourage that we locate buildings so they will not substantially block views that are enjoyed by others. There's also some related general plan policies. Consider the effect of the construction on the private views of neighbors and attempt to achieve an equitable balance. And then some municipal code sections that speak to respecting the private views of neighboring properties. Let's see. So staff, I believe we received this, this correspondence this week, so we haven't had a lot of time to really kind of sit with it, but we did visit the neighboring property on the tour today. It was a little bit more overcast than is shown in this picture. So really the staff is going to defer to the commission on whether, in accordance with these guidelines and code sections, you find this to be a substantial impact to the view, or if it's a more insignificant impact. A couple things that you might consider if you do find that the project does encroach upon the existing view is potentially asking the applicant to evaluate lowering the plate or ridge heights. The first floor plate height is at about 9.5 feet. The second floor plate height is at about 8.5 feet. The project does meet all of our height standards. So they do have a 18-foot exterior plate, and the overall height is below the maximum allowed. So they're proposing 22 feet, 3 inches, and they're allowed up to 24. Moving on to right-of-way character, there's an existing, as you can see in this photo, this is an existing paver driveway that exceeds 14 feet in the right-of-way. The code section below speaks to 14 feet being the maximum width. So staff has included condition number 4, that the width of the driveway be reduced down to no more than 14 feet in the public right-of-way. Regarding landscaping and site coverage, the applicant has proposed a number of both permeable and impermeable site coverage elements, all of which comply with the city's regulations. And with regards to finished materials, it includes a combination of both vertical and horizontal wood siding, stone, standing seam metal roof, and aluminum clad windows and doors. So with that, staff is recommending that the commission adopt a resolution accepting the concept design study with conditions. And those conditions include completion of the volume study before final details review, reducing the size of the windows in the living and dining rooms to be more human scaled and incorporating divisions. Also, there's number 3 is more of a final detail, but providing details for the proposed fence along the north property line. Reducing the width of the driveway, making sure the chimney complies with our dimensional standards. And then number 6, the applicant did provide specifications for all of their exterior light fixtures. We just need to confirm the lumen levels. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Marnie, I had a question regarding the chimney. So the chimney is doesn't meet the standard for the width as it on the structure, right?
Correct.
Because it's cut back and then it.
Yes. So
that's staff's concern.
So the code actually sets forth the dimensional standards. Once a chimney extends beyond the eave of the roof, it needs to be reduced down. I think the chimney on the roof plan was at like 7 feet. And I think the maximum is, yeah, so here it measured 7 feet 11. Maybe I did that wrong. We can ask the architect to clarify.
All right, we'll get some clarification on
Yeah.
that. Okay, thank you.
Can I ask another question about the
from
chimney?
Commissioner Howell.
Was the netting at the height of the chimney, or was the netting at the height of the roof?
The ridge of the roof.
Okay. Can you go back to the picture of the neighbor? Okay. And so then would the chimney's going to extend up from there, from the peak of that orange?
Correct.
Okay.
That'd be approximately 2 feet.
Okay.
That's the requirement by code. It'd be 2 feet above a horizontal line.
Gotcha.
Okay, any other questions for staff?
No.
Thank you, Marnie. All right, I'd like to invite the architect to make his presentation at this time.
Good evening, Commissioners. Craig Holdren, representing Grover Myros and Michelle Comeau, whom some of you may know. Michelle's been, of course, part of the landscape design crew here for many, many years, and Grover, of course, has a lot of experience with surveying. So they've owned this property for 25 years, And so they have a very good sense of it. In fact, for many years, Michelle ran her design studio out of it and still maintains her design office in that little space in the back that you went through today. So they understand what the potential of the property. They've been thinking about it a very long time, and this is in fact the house for them. They've lived in the valley for many years, and this is going to be their permanent retirement home. As we saw, thank you for the great presentation, Marnie. It is essentially a reverse floor plan where we have the main public area as well as the master suite upstairs. The ADU is below, as well as 2 secondary guest rooms. The house was really conceived of in terms of trying to take advantage of some spectacular views that they've long enjoyed from the roof of that little element in the back that we toured today. And so we sort of set heights accordingly, and we did push the house away from the street and more to the north, thinking that would obviate some of the impact on that house to the east in particular, as well as improve relationship to that house to the south. As you saw, there's some beautiful lots to the north, but there's nothing built there in terms of that impact. The house, as Marnie mentioned, is a very simple L-shaped gable on the upper story. And we tried to kind of leaven that impact by having these two one-story blocks with these green roofs sort of projecting to the south and towards the street, sort of having that stepping down that, of course, we think makes more sense for Carmel. Green roofs are always sort of an interesting idea. They look great in renderings and perspectives, but then the reality of them sometimes can be a little bit more disappointing. I think the important factor here is that Michelle would be responsible for maintaining them. And of course, she's an extraordinary garden person and a bit of a climber as well. So, I think that the idea that this would actually be a credit to what a green roof could be, I think is an important observation to make. Again, I spoke briefly how we tried to ameliorate some of those impacts on the two houses to the east and to the south. We saw the view today. Our feeling is that that's a fairly modest impact on that view, particularly since a lot of that house does take advantage of more of a southwestern view, both from the main space of the house and even from that upper room. A lot of that view towards Point Lobos and so forth is more of a southwest view. Certainly, I'm not saying there's no impact there, but we were conscientious, we thought, in trying to make that as minimal impact as possible at the same time to achieve something of what we knew to be available if we were to do what we did. I could talk about materials and so forth, but perhaps you've got particular questions about the issues that would be better time spent.
Greg, do you have any comments about staff's conditions regarding divided lights and window sizes?
Oh yeah, so window sizes. Well, I don't know, for those of you who know Grover and Michelle, they prefer to be outside if at all possible all the time. So I mean, if this house could be all glass, it might have been presented that way. Obviously there are some substantial glass windows being proposed. It's very core to how they would like this house to be. But having said that, there's been discussions where we're aware of the city and Marnie's observations about additional breakup, possibly reducing somewhat those impacts. I'd love to have some strong direction about what you guys are thinking. I think that whole idea of it being a little bit of a treehouse could be maintained, but it depends a little bit on how far you guys think that we might want to go with that. But again, from the owner's standpoint, the idea of maximum glass is very much in keeping with what they want to do, which is why we set the house so far to the north, so it's away from the south, so it's away from the street, so that those impacts would be, again, tried to be reduced somewhat.
Any other questions for the architect?
No. Just a quick question. Would it be possible to reduce the slope of the roof to 312 to maybe kind of make it disappear and not be so visible from the neighbor's house?
Yeah, I think going to a 3 and 12 roof would bring down that upper height. Oh, and just one point of clarification. Earlier, the staff report said it was a 9.5-foot first floor plate. It's actually a 9.5 floor-to-floor height. So I just wanted to be clear that that includes the structural buildup for that intervening floor, that 9.5.
So the plate height is less?
It would be about 8'2" to the ceiling, yeah, downstairs, not 9.5 feet. But yes, I would be open to that, and I think going to a 3 and 12 would be something the owners would be open to as well.
Okay. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to invite any members of the public come forward and address the Planning Commission regarding this application.
Hi, good to see you all again. Thanks for coming by and looking at that view from our upper deck. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know how busy you guys are. And had an opportunity to talk to these folks a little bit, and we're kind of coming to some good understandings about things. I think the idea of getting the roof height reduced a little bit would be terrific. We also discussed a little bit the chimney. The chimney currently in the plan is canted to the left of the view from our house, which means it comes up more into the center above the orange story pole webbing. And if it would be possible to flip it, because that is a canted, I guess the fireplace kind of starts out as a rectangle, and then as the chimney goes up, it has a little angle and then raises above the roof. If it could go the other way, then it would be not in the middle of the ocean view, which would be very much appreciated. So I think that these particular mitigations would be fabulous. I think it would really help to mitigate our concerns. It would be nice to see the story poles repositioned so we can see what the final product potentially would look like. But just from the view of what we could see so far, those two mitigations I think would make a big difference in being able to see more of the bordering around the view, more of the green space around the bordering, and less of a wall appearance, and also getting that chimney out of the view and more over to the side. So I want to tell you how much I appreciate the time, and I hope we can solve this little problem.
And I'm sorry, what's your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were all friends. My name is Rebecca Tuchel, and I'm one of the, it's basically my family that owns the house.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Did the owner want to come up and make a comment? Please come up. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you out, but.
Good evening now, Commissioners and staff. This is Michelle Camo, and Grover and I are so excited about coming to Carmel. We have been thinking about this and dreaming about this for years, and we are in love with what Craig has designed for us. We love every single thing about it. It has fit all of our bullet points. And I've been a presence in Carmel for 20 years. I designed, as a volunteer, the original median strips in 2005. I also designed the garden here at City Hall, and the garden is an archive in the Archive of American Gardens at the Smithsonian, so it will be there until perpetuity. I also designed, volunteer, the Devendorf 911, and have just been around town for a long time. It will be really nice to make it our home. And as far as the neighbor to the south, Todd Antes, I've spoken to him several times. Has no problem at all about the structure at all. He's actually looking forward to talking to Craig about doing a new roof and some work on his house as well. And that's probably why he's not here tonight. The view is an interesting story. When we bought the house, there was a cypress hedge all the way across the back. And maybe 8 or 9 years ago, we came home, maybe 5 years ago, and there was a window cut through. All of the cypress limbs were gone, and it was just a perfect view over our house to the ocean. So that's how that view was created. And I didn't think it would ever have a bearing on our building when that happened, or I may well have said, why did you do this? But that's the story behind the view. Aside from that, what does Grover say? Oh, Grover says, we are kind of sharing the view. So that's all I have to say. If anyone has a question, feel free to ask. No? Okay.
Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome.
Yes, come on up. Come on up, Grover.
My name is Grover Myros. Michelle's my wife. We're very sensitive to neighbors, and we want to work in any way we can to make our presence there pleasant. But, working together so that we can get what we hope to get and what we thought we might get, and that we take into consideration their wants and needs. And I think what was brought up, in terms of the chimney, and we could look at the pitch of the roof, anything to do to lessen. I don't feel it's a major encroachment on their view, but it is an encroachment, and we can look into what we can do to mitigate that. So, my family moved to Big Sur in the 20s. I've been on a peninsula all my life. And we have a sensitivity to neighbors and people around us. So, thank you.
Thank you, Grover. Okay, anybody else from the public want to address the Planning Commission regarding this application? Okay, I don't see anybody in the chambers coming forward. Anybody online got their hand up?
No one online, sir.
Okay, I'm going to close the public comments, bring it back to...
Chair LePage, I just had a...
Oh, I'm sorry. I just saw Neil Cruz.
Oh, a hand came up?
Yes, hand
okay.
came up.
I can't see who it is, so...
You can go ahead and unmute yourself, Neil.
Can you hear me?
We can hear something.
Okay. Thank you. These are some wonderful people that have come up to talk, and I have love for some of them and know a little bit about their history. So I hate to say anything at all negative about this design. I think I'm seeing a standing seam metal roof. And I think we had a discussion about that at a Planning Commission last month about we were going to look into the fact that there are so many standing seam roofs. I believe on the next application after this, we also have a standing seam roof. Are we going to get into that a little bit with the Planning Commission? Are we going to discuss that as a policy? Because it clearly seems to me that unless we put out a pretty firm signal that we don't like to see a lot of that. I mean, there might be an occasion where, for whatever reason, it is the right thing, but this has become a norm now in these applications. And so I really hope that we can sort of tackle that in general as a discussion, as Chairman LePage has suggested. I know that we're real busy and we have a lot of meetings, so it's hard to do anything right now, but I really would like to engage that, because the standing seam roofs, again, I say this is going to look like Squaw Valley after a while. Everything is standing seam roofs in Squaw Valley, so because of the snow. The second part is, and I'm going to introduce a term that has come to me, and that is useful in this case. And the term that I use is hybrid modern. And everybody's so, you see it in all the magazines, you see it in all the newspapers. It doesn't matter that 75% of the people of America don't like modern design. It's what is being pushed by the press and the architectural community. And so then people begin to like it, and it's not really as human-friendly as the old European cottages, the old European architecture that is always mentioned when they talk about why tourists come to our area. And we see this again with no muntins in the windows, and sort of these very, very small trim around the windows, the elimination of detail. If you read the general plan, they talk about hand-carved moldings and all these details and ornaments that represent human scale that look like they were made by the human hand, and it makes it friendly, and it makes it warm, and it makes it cozy. And hybrid modern I'm seeing is that there seems to be a sense that we got to be careful about doing full modern because they'll say no to it. But now we have this angle that, well, you know, you have mid-century modern, you have prairie style, you have these intermediate styles, and that's going to start to inch us more towards the modern. And then when we have 150 of those, the next step will be, let's just go to full modern. We on the CPA see this sort of sliding trend, and we're trying to in a kind way, say that there's a lot of residents in Carmel that talk to us and they're unhappy with this. And they see it sort of moving away. If you read the description of architecture in the general plan, for example, it talks about hand-carved and wood this and so on and so forth.
Neil, can you summarize?
That's it?
Your 3 minutes are up. You want to summarize?
That's it, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil, for your comments. The architect would like to come back and make some response to some of the comments. Please come up this time.
Thank you. The whole idea of modern architecture in Carmel, it's an interesting one. I mean, modern is as useless a term as traditional, right? Modern, Walter Gropius, the Bauhaus, the mid-century modern, you know, many schools of thinking have happened all within that sort of convenient umbrella. I think what can be very successful in Carmel are the use of materials that break scale down. There are lots of ways to provide visual interest and subtlety. We have two different types of horizontal wood siding, one vertical, one horizontal here. We have quite a bit of lovely stonework. We've got a variety of things happening, so I don't think it's fair to say that, again, sort of lump it all, that there's sort of this lack of human scale or engagement by a lot of the modern architecture I do see going on in Carmel all the time. And then the idea that you don't have Walter Berdy, Mark Mills, John Thodos, I mean, Frank Lloyd Wright. I mean, there's a lot of great architecture which is now celebrated, but that Savings and Loan we looked at earlier, that's a modern building, and yet it's being celebrated as something worthy of attention and maintenance. So again, I have trouble with sort of that de facto disregard for the idea that modern can't be appropriate within Carmel. I also took a walk today from 4th Street to 6th Street in Carmel on Santa Fe, looking at the architecture of that corridor. And there are no standing seam metal roofs in that area. So, you know, the third key principle in the design guidelines is about promoting diversity of design. That's what the guidelines call out. And so to say that we're at risk of becoming a squaw valley or a mountain home community, I don't think is accurate. I think, yes, there is a current trend. These things wax and wane, they always do, of seeing more metal roofs, but they're so far from becoming a dominant or even a pervasive aesthetic character within the city. And of course, a lot of that has to do with fire resistance, right? I mean, we're a much more fire-aware group than we were 10 or even 15 years ago. And if you don't want heavy concrete tile, which again is not a terribly authentic material, asphalt composition shingle, again, not a terribly authentic material, authenticity also being a byword for Carmel. If you're not interested in things like that, you don't have a whole lot of options. I mean, this house would be a perfect candidate for a wood shingle roof. It would be very appropriate with the rest of the character of the proposed architecture. But again, that's not a good idea. That's where a lot of these fires occur. And we have, as a firm, I know, you guys have approved projects where we have suggested the synthetic wood shake. But I've always felt a little bit curious making that presentation because it's by definition an inauthentic material, and the metal actually is authentic. There are different types. There's a lot of stuff available now which really brings forward the more mute, less reflective characteristics of it. It all gets dusty and dirty. Again, I would hope that Carmel and the Planning Commission remains open to that being a viable alternative, particularly in light of the fire considerations we have and the idea that heavy tile and or comp shingle are really sort of the only other alternatives for a vaulted roof scenario. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, yes, come forward, Frankie.
My name is Francine Frankie Laney, and my daughter Raina owns the lot to the north of this project. And she wrote you a letter. And if you have all received it, I will sit down. It looks like you have. I don't need to reiterate. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Frankie. Okay, nobody else would like to come up and speak to us? I think everybody has had an opportunity to make their comments. I'm going to close the public hearings, open it up to the commission. Commissioner Karapetkoff, would you like to begin?
Yes, yeah. I think the architect answered my question. I understand the design concept. The metal roof, in this case, I don't think it's a problem. If it's possible, maybe I can talk. If it's possible to reduce the slope of the roof to improve the view for the neighbor, that would be an improvement. I'm a little bit concerned about the glass railing on the top floor. I'm starting to see a lot of houses like that. Next to my house, there are 2 remodels that have rooftop balconies or terraces with glass railings, and they look great on paper, and they look good for the first couple of months, and then people stop cleaning them and they start looking not so good. So I'm not really a big fan of glass railings in general. So my preference would be to have a solid railing for the roof. It's much easier it provides more protection from the street as well. This one here, if the plan is correct, has glass on 3 sides of the balcony or the patio on the top. In terms of mass and bulk, I think now that we know what the dimensions are, I have no issues with that. The size of the windows, I always try to reduce them to a minimum. In this case here, the upper floor on the southern side has quite a lot of glass. That is something that I always encourage people to reduce because it clears glare and creates problems with privacy. And I think staff made some recommendations in this area as well. Yeah, I think these are my comments at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Karapetkoff. Commissioner Dels, your comments?
I like this house a lot. It's very pretty. I think it fits in the neighborhood. You've added an ADU, but it's modest. So we're not seeing the situation where you've pushed too much onto the lot. It's just the right amount on the lot. To the neighbor, you have great views whether this house gets built as planned or not. I mean, they're really good views down to Point Lobos. But anytime we can protect any view, I think we try to. And I think it's entirely possible by doing 2 things with the chimney and the pitch. So I would say do those things. My colleagues will probably have more comments on windows than I do. This is the second project in 2 months where the word treehouse has been used. And I get it. That's kind of what I have at my house, where and it's great to live in the trees and to have as much of that surrounding you as you possibly can. And I think that includes your deck. So I don't necessarily agree with my colleague on. I wouldn't want your deck to have a solid wall. I think glass is fine. If there's a disagreement here, I would then push towards something like a wrought iron deck, or something you could still see through to continue to enjoy it. But I'm supportive of this project.
Thank you, Commissioner Dels. Commissioner Allen, your comments?
Yeah, so I actually do want to address the neighbor to the north, Raina Laney, and the concerns that she had. I believe the concerns were over height and potentially the ability to the concern that she would lose her view of the Point Lobos. And so I like what we've talked about tonight in terms of trying to maybe if we change the pitch of the roof to bring it down a little, that would probably help with the neighbor to the north also. Because it's a vacant lot and because we don't actually know what the impact would be, it's a very difficult situation. But I believe that since this house is set back in the lot, that will help also. But if we could, as discussed, if it's an easy fix to change the roof pitch, I would be in favor of that. I go along with the recommendation of the staff in terms of the windows. I don't generally go for the large expansion of glass. And for me, that gets out of this human scale type of situation. I do believe that the neighbor behind, to your point, the view is amazing and will remain amazing. But if it's an easy fix to switch the fireplace and to reduce the roof, that's great. I actually don't really like standing seam roofs, and so it'd be really nice if we could find alternatives to that. I realize with this one, from the street view, you're not seeing the roof, and so it doesn't bring up as much of a concern for me, but we really do need to talk about and maybe get some those new guidelines that are coming out at some point to give us direction on whether or not we want to move forward with that type of material. But otherwise, I think that it's coming along, and I would be ready to support it with some few tweaks.
Okay. I just want to say that I think this is a very beautiful cottage. I think it makes very strong connections to the style of the homes we have and the local materials that we use, the cedar siding, the stone. It has some, it has sort of an eclectic feel to it in terms of the way the shape of it, in terms of how it looks like a cottage. It still looks like a cottage, and I think it has some beautiful design elements. I'm a little hesitant when I see an architect who's operating at a very high level to impose subjective things onto them, because I feel like artistic expression has to be allowed, and I think that this home is an artistic expression. It's got some beautiful elements. I love those stone columns. When you look at it, there's this facade going under the house that leads into the house. It's got these beautiful stone columns that go along the side. And I'm very hesitant to recommend any changes. I even have a problem with the conditions that staff has put on it by placing mullions in the windows and reducing the height of the windows. Those windows are on the south side. I don't think they have any impact to the street. The guideline speaks to picture windows from the street. This doesn't really have that. So I have a little different view than some of the comments that are made by my fellow commissioners. With regards to the view to the neighbor to the east, this is clearly not significant. I mean, they have a fantastic view. I mean, significant for me, if you want to quantify it, it means you get over 50% of the view. That's when you start reaching significant. I mean, I don't think this even affects 10% of their view. I mean, they have an amazing view that goes to the west and then sweeps over to the south. So this really clearly is not significant. I mean, if the applicant wants to lower the roof, I mean, it's a simple thing to shift the chimney over where it breaks. But like I said, I'm even hesitant because I think the way it's been presented, obviously the architect did that for a reason. And I don't, you know, for me right now, it's pleasing the way it is. And it isn't really creating a problem with the view. So, I mean, if they want to do it, that's their choice in my mind. But there are no significant impacts. With regards to the lots to the north, it's really hard to make a determination how it's even going to affect those. We don't have any projects that are being presented. We didn't go on the lot. You know, we didn't have the opportunity to go on the lot, so I can't even really speak to that. I certainly would, if that particular neighbor wants us to look at that between now, this is concept. If you want us to do that, then I think, you know, we could do that next time we see this. And if it looks like there's something there that's a real serious impact, you know, we could look at it. But I want to express that, you know, we don't own the views in this town. What we try to do here is to make projects that don't have a significant impact. And it isn't a significant impact when one little speck of a roof sticks up when you have a 180-degree view. That's not what we're doing here, you know. I understand people value every single little bit of that, but we don't own it. And it is put upon us to determine what is significant. For me, I try to quantify, like I said, because that takes some of the subjectivity out of it. And if it gets close to 50%, or if it's right in front of your window, and it's, you know, that's it. Even if there's a view over here, but if from one room it completely obscures the view, that's significant in my mind. And in this case, it's not significant. So, you know, I'm going to make a motion. If I get a second, there'll be a motion. There could be a substitute motion made, but I'm going to make a motion that we accept the design as it is presented by the applicant and remove the conditions regarding the windows. The chimney needs to meet the standards, so that's fine. But I'm going to make that motion, and all the other conditions of concept I would leave as per staff. But
would you add to flip the chimney?
I'll add to flip the chimney. The architect's
Okay,
giving me that thumbs up. So it's okay.
I'm sorry, but those windows are 4 by 6 feet tall, facing the street, and it's just glass.
Yeah, I understand, and that's a valid concept, and the guidelines speak to that. I was going to ask Marty to bring up that guideline and read it. That might be helpful. Could you do that real quickly, or is that? I tried to get it up. I was messing around trying to search it, but I couldn't get it to pop up. Otherwise, I would have read it.
So, Aaron, you're looking at the front windows.
Oh, you got it right there.
2 front windows.
Oh, you got it right there.
Yep.
So what, you want to read it?
So,
Here.
Hang on. Let me find the part that talks about it.
I mean, I want to honor the guidelines, but
It says divided light windows are encouraged. Divided light windows should appear to be true divided light. And then, let's see. Is there anything else? Yeah, go ahead.
Are you reading, is it the final details or concept details?
This is under final.
Okay, that's
What do you have?
I had to choose with that one, so I thought it was final, but I wanted to choose the right one. If you guys could switch downstairs, if you could switch over to the computer for us, please.
So the use of grand doorway and picture windows on street-facing elevations is discouraged.
That was my impression. This is, I don't know if this qualifies for that. We could bring up that west elevation again, or just the rendering probably would. Do you want to answer a question, Craig? Come up to the microphone if you want to answer a question, or you have a question.
Just wanted to observe that portion with the two windows that face the street are 52 feet from the edge of the pavement back. They're set back 52 feet. I'm scaling it right here. We're 37 feet from the property line, and there's a large public easement in front of that.
I mean, a lot of discussion about the size of windows and other, fenestration and so forth has to do with the human scale, and I don't think that these are beyond human scale. I mean, these are windows that reflect the height of human beings. They don't go down to the floor, do they? Yeah, they don't go to the floor. So I just don't think that they challenge the human scale here. So, and the street elevation, I think, is the intent of the guideline, that we don't have these large picture windows, which kind of became popular with the ranch-style houses. But so I said I've got a motion. It's out there. If it gets a second, we'll see what happens. Unless you have, Commissioner Dells asked me to include that the chimney will be flipped over towards the north. So that's my motion.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Substitute motions? Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Allen?
No.
Commissioner Delves?
Yes.
Commissioner Karpetkov?
Yes.
Chair LePage?
Yes, motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to our last item on the public hearings tonight. This is another design study. This is DS 24089 and a lot merger. Lot merger 24151. This is a Britain project, consideration of a concept design study for the demolition of an existing single-family residence and the construction of a new 3,178 square foot, one-story, single-family residence, inclusive of a 402 square foot attached garage, which will require a lot more merger, and it's located on Santa Fe Street, southwest of Mountain View. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Chair. This presentation is much shorter than my last one, I promise. So the subject site is 8,000 square feet. The existing residence is 1,587 square feet. Maintains a 200 square foot parking pad, as well as a 387 square foot accessory structure at the rear. The applicant is proposing to demolish all improvements across the site and construct a 2,716 square foot single family residence with a 462 square foot attached garage. Together that results in a 3,178 square foot single family residence. There's also a 484 square foot proposed detached ADU at the rear of the site, as well as a lot merger proposed as part of the project. There are 15 rated trees on the site, as well as 3 trees in the adjacent right-of-way. There are 7 trees proposed for removal. They are all either moderately significant, non-significant, or unrated ornamental fruit trees. The tree removal has been tentatively approved by the Forest and Beach Commission, as well as some additional trees approved by the forester. A condition of those tree removal permits are that no tree removal permit shall be issued and no trees shall be removed until the building permit is issued for the project. So all the trees are remaining on site until construction activities actually start. And then there is a replanting requirement of planting 3 upper canopy trees on the project site. So the city does maintain driveway standards, which are located outside of our zoning code. They're in Title 12, which addresses the public right-of-way. Part of those permit conditions for establishing driveways, it does say that no person shall be able to permit a driveway unless it complies with the following standards. The applicant has proposed a driveway that does not comply with these standards, either fully or in part. The maximum of a driveway shall not exceed 14 feet in width, and that is the portion of the driveway between the property line and the street edge. So again, this is fully, or the driveway completely located within the public right-of-way. No property shall have more than 1 driveway, except on corner lots and lots of more than 80 feet. So this lot is more than 80 feet, but then we need that minimum distance between driveways needs to be at least 18 feet. So we do have a number of conflicts, so we do have a condition of approval to work with planning and as well as the Public Works Department to revise the driveway to comply with the driveway standards. So staff has not identified any privacy or view impacts associated with the project. All of the windows, it is a 1-story project. All of the windows will be screened by a proposed 6-foot fence around the property. The majority of the windows at the rear are located well from the rear property line or screened by the ADU. And then we also have the 6-foot tall fence located on the south property line as well as the north property line. These are the 2 windows nearest to the any property line, and those are these windows here, which again is screened by a 6-foot tall fence. And then this is just an additional view from the north and south elevation, so these would be the 2 sides of the building. Again, we have a 1-story building that complies with all of our height requirements. It's approximately 16 feet tall. The plates are at a maximum of 12 feet tall, which is the maximum allowed per the zoning code. And then our building form is roughly an lowercase h shape in reverse with a combination of gabled and hipped roof forms throughout. We do have this dormer form. However, in staff's opinion, that dormer is within an appropriate scale for the building. So we do have some considerations and draft conditions for final details review. Few are pretty standard. One is to complete the volume study as well as to comply with the recommended tree density. I briefly spoke about revising the driveway to be consistent with our driveway standards. The applicant is proposing a standing seam metal roof consistent with past Planning Commission direction. Staff has included a draft condition to revise the roof material. And then also this application was complete for a concept review. However, the application was incomplete in terms of providing all the information needed for a final details review. That is a standard practice. We don't require everything be submitted for a concept and final. So there's a condition to continue to work with staff to submit the additional information that we would need for a finished details review. That includes the landscape plan, material information, information on lighting, things like that. And with that, staff recommends the Planning Commission adopt a resolution as described on the screen. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for staff from the commission?
Yeah, the only question is, I didn't have a chance to look at the previous project that we approved, the Golden Mean project next door. They also have an ADU in the back.
Yes.
And what is the distance between the ADU on the Golden Mean side versus the ADU here? Because they're all in the back and they seem to be pretty close to the fence.
I believe they'll be 8 feet apart.
Okay.
They both should be complying with that 4-foot minimum setback required for ADUs.
Okay, so there's no conflict there. Okay.
Yeah, it's just worth a reminder, though, that the Planning Commission doesn't have purview over the ADU in this project.
Okay.
Okay, any more questions from staff? All right, thank you. Invite the architect once again, Craig Holden, to come forward.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you, Evan, for that succinct but terrific staff report. This house less modern, but it still has a standing seam metal roof, at least currently. These owners, Terry and Jeff Britton, are local residents. They currently have a larger house in the valley, but this is their retirement home. This is not a spec home. I know they split off that property to the south, and that is, of course, whatever it is, but this is actually their personal home. And the ADU actually is seen as a potential caretaker location for them as they grow older. I think the house is pretty self-explanatory, again, with Evan's comprehensive overview. It's a mixture of board and bat, one story, relatively low slope roof, a fair amount of stone, and the driveway issue is an interesting one. Two-car garages are nice. And when you have a double-sized lot, it makes a lot of sense, and that's sort of a tortured area of Carmel where the roads are even less consistent than they are elsewhere, and street parking is kind of tough. So being able to make that properly usable for two cars would be terrific, but I understand we're not in compliance. I think we can cobble together something that puts us in compliance, but it will make using one of those bays a little bit more difficult, I suspect, relative to the amount of coverage we can allot between the property line and the front of the garage door, and still, the house is set back, we have walkways, things of that nature. But anyway, we can certainly make that work, but it's going to be a little awkward.
Any questions for the architect? We have a question here.
What, this metal roof is very visible from the street. What other options would you consider?
Well, I would think some sort of a concrete tile would be appropriate. That C-door shake, that synthetic wood shake that I had mentioned earlier, I think would also be inappropriate. I know the owners actually really do like the metal, but I understand that may not be in the cards. So those would be the two alternatives I would be most inclined to present at a future meeting, pending owner discussion.
Thank you, Craig. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the architect? Okay, thank you. All right, this time I'm going to invite members of the public to come up and make their comments.
Good evening. I'm Helga Mays, and I just got back from Europe after 5 weeks. And I come to my house, and I was shocked when I see all the poles and the heights of this. I said, where's my privacy? Where's the charm from Carmel? This was 35 years ago. David Birch, the one who did the tack box, we told him we were the most charming. It cost money, we know, we saved up for that. We want our dream house, and it needs to be a really Carmel house. And it looks so big, just staked out, but the massive of the whole project, it's just kind of, where's Carmel? Things go forward, you got to do different things, but I'm totally shocked. Looking at the wall, my charming backyard, where's my privacy? There's a wall going up with 2 windows. It's just kind of, I don't know, my nice little house, where's my charming house? Party's gone. And I have this beautiful David Birch's beautiful waving. People sometimes say, who did this roof? It's all waving. Not the ones from England, it's different, the roof from England, but it's all wavy. It took a lot of wood and what cost outrageous money. It's just a roof. And now I just got back from Europe, so everything is different over there, but oh my God, what can be done? And then 2 windows just looking at my charming backyard, 2 windows. And this wall, what can be done? To maybe put trees up, behind my fence, or, I'm not kind of really kind of scared how it will turn out. Just a massive project. This is what it is. And I could maybe need help. I didn't all understand what he was saying. And The architect was saying, I didn't really kind of hear what he had to say, but it's just kind of very upsetting. So kind of to help what can be done to keep this charm for my little house.
Ma'am, where do you live?
On Taurus, I'm just.
So you're behind the house?
Yeah, I'm right behind the house. Yeah.
So you're looking at the west elevation of the house, is that? And you're concerned about the windows?
No, I'm concerned. The whole massive of the heights of everything.
You're concerned about the height?
The heights and just 4 feet from my fence, and then looking at a wall.
So you're concerned about the setback? The distance from your property line? Okay, I'm just trying to, I want to understand what your concerns are. Yes, thank you.
And something what could be done in the heights. I mean, I'm repeating myself. It's high now, but the massive of the spectrum of the whole thing, the length of it and the height is just very concerning. And when I hear like metal roof, I kind of, oh my God, how does it fit into Carmel when I think of my beautiful waving wooden roof?
Okay, thank you. I think we understand your concerns. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you very
All right.
much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other members of the public want to come forward? Come on up. That's fine. Come on up.
Speaking for her helping.
That's fine. You can speak wherever you want.
I am next door to her.
Okay. So you're to her south or north?
I have no direction.
If you're looking at the house from the street, right or left?
I'm left.
Okay. Okay. North. Great.
I think he said if the fence would be 6 foot. Is that right?
Yes.
Is that right? Right now, the fence is not 6 foot. So her concern is it would have to be raised. Possibly some bushes could be planted. I don't know where the windows are. I don't know if the house could be set back a bit. It's 4 foot, I guess, from her fence at the moment. Maybe. But anyway, it's very big. The house is very big. Her house is small. The metal roof, I don't like. I can see part of it from my yard. When the story poles went up, I went out on my deck as they were going up, and I called the neighbor down the way, and I said, "What are these?" And he said, "They've been there for months." And I said, "You better look again, because there's new ones." Anyway, the aluminum windows, not crazy about those. Siding on the house, I don't like those. Anyway, it sounded more like a mobile home when I was reading what they were using on the home. That's my 2 cents. But she's concerned about the height of the house and the breadth of the house. We live in little houses. That's it. Oh,
Okay.
I'm Nancy Gaylord, and I live that way.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. I have another comment come up.
Hi, thank you. My name is Kelly Francis, and as some of you know from earlier meetings, I'm to the south on Santa Fe, to the south of the property that's being developed next to the property that we're now talking about. So regarding, I submitted a letter earlier, and hopefully you received that, so I won't repeat that, but I do feel that the metal roof, there already will be a metal roof that was approved, I believe, on the house immediately adjacent to ours to the north on that development, the 3 lots being split into 2 and 1. So I would think it would be discouraged for that reason. And then, so I'm just going to read what I wrote earlier. As most of you know, my comments are from my perspective as the 3rd of 5 generations here and more to come. I submitted written comments concerning this development already, but it seems important to also comment that there seems to be a trend in new construction away from Forest Village housing and instead toward taking down as many trees as possible and building mega structures on the maximum square footage allowed. I do appreciate that the proposed residence will be 1 story, but despite that, it too seems to be part of this trend. I do understand that updated design guidelines and a city ADU ordinance, subject to state law, of course, are in progress and therefore are not applicable yet. It is my understanding that most residents, including in my neighborhood, prefer a more limited forest village housing approach, as do we, and the preservation of the unique Carmel character that it entails. Hopefully that is what will be considered and applied shortly in the future if it cannot be done currently. And I do agree, as I said in the letter, with the staff report as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Okay, is there anybody online? Any hands up? Leah?
I don't see any hands, sir.
Okay, the architect had their hand up. You want to follow up comments?
Just real quick, the portion of the house that projects to the west, which is that master bedroom wing, there are 2 small windows on that, and that portion of house is 17 feet wide that projects. The ADU has 1 small window on that west-facing side, and it is 4 feet away, but the main house is 5'6" away. So I wanted to just clarify that one projecting gable is 5'6" away, and it's just under 17 feet wide with 2 small windows. So in terms of the actual impact of windows and light pollution and so forth, it's actually quite modest, I suspect. Well, not I suspect it is. Yeah, thank you.
And don't go away. And then the setbacks on the west side, or what are they? I mean, the house is at an angle, right?
Yeah, well, no, the house is, can you bring that up, Evan, the site plan, if you don't mind?
And then the other thing, what are you proposing to do to mitigate the impacts on the rear of the property there?
Well, I think planting some taller bushes is a fine idea. We have 4 feet. So this is the back. This is the west side of the property here. You can see the ADU is 4 feet off, and then the house proper, that projecting gable, is 5'6" off.
Sorry, the computer's catching up with my my movements.
Thank you, Evan.
Getting a little cursor lag there.
Yeah, something like that.
So I think creating a hedgerow of shrubbery there is a good idea, and we need to look at that.
Yeah, we don't have a landscape plan yet, do we? No.
Not really.
This is just concept.
And just to help, so as you're looking at the plans here, on the right-hand side is the building that Mr. Holden was talking about, that has the 2 windows. The building section on the right-hand side is connected to the main house, and then the ADU on the left is where there's the 1 window.
But the other image shows how it's placed on the lot, correct? To the left.
This shows how the one that you're looking at right now is how the house is placed on the lot.
So this is proposed.
The one on the left is the existing.
Ah, gotcha.
And
Okay.
this is existing. So the existing site is, I guess, skewed or off-center, and this is all proposed to be demolished.
Gotcha.
And then the proposed structure will
so
be
now it's gonna run parallel. And that
center.
That the top of the screen is the west, right?
Correct. That's the
Yeah.
property line in question.
And then the neighbor
behind.
The neighbor that
That's right.
spoke directly behind looks like she's got a pretty small setback there.
I might offer something else just to consider. It's not necessarily a suggestion, but the Planning Commission can also authorize taller fences to just something to consider. The 6-foot height limit is not a hard and fast height requirement for the rear setback. The applicant could actually reconstruct whatever height that fence height is.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be one option to consider as well, either in lieu of planting, in addition to planting.
So that's a new 6-foot high fence or an existing 6-foot high fence?
I believe it is new. The fence is shown completely within the property boundaries, whereas
Right.
on the existing site plan, you can see.
Oh, I see. Yeah, it's kind of it's migrated around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it must be. It's got to be new because the other one's kind of migrated. Okay. Any other questions for Staff? Okay, I think everybody's had a chance to make their comments.
We do have one raised.
We got a hand up?
Yes, Neil.
All right.
please.
Bring them on.
Go ahead and unmute yourself, Neil.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say that.
Is this Neil?
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
all right, I didn't hear that. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes, Neil, we got you.
Looking at the front elevation on sheet A1, that I appreciate that the architect is now coming into something that looks more like a natural or an integrated style for architecture. We have the muntins on the windows and the stone and the wood fence, and you can see this just feels much more like a part of what we've always done in this village, not trying to take a modern and make it traditional. So I want to compliment him on that. I think this is good design. I also understand the other issues that are being discussed about the size of the house and so on, and the neighbor. I'm happy to hear everybody talking and working through that. That's as good as it gets. So that's wonderful. Thank you, Chairman, for really patiently getting the input of people who come to the microphone and trying to make that clear. That's so helpful. So I guess for me, it's the metal roof again, and I've said enough about that. So that's all I want to say. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Neil. Okay, I think we got everybody? Okay,
Yes,
I
sir.
want to close the public comments, bring it back to the commission. You had a question?
Well, could we discuss, I'm still a little bit confused on the garage and what staff's recommendation is on the garage.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, go ahead, staff. As I understood it, the driveway's too wide with because of the two-car garage. Is that correct, or?
Yeah, so there's nothing in respect to the actual garage. It's the driveway, and it's just the portion of the driveway between the property line and the right-of-way. So there's specific standards within Title 12 that speak to how driveways, and again, it's not the driveway on private property, it's the driveway within the right-of-way should be treated. And one of those requirements is that the driveway is no wider than 14 feet. No property have more than one driveway. There are some exceptions, one of those being that if the property is 80 feet or more, so this property would qualify for more than one driveway, but that distance needs to be 18 feet apart. So one solution that we offer often applicants is, just for this small section of right-of-way between the property line and the street edge is comply with this 14-foot requirement to minimize the amount of paving within the right-of-way, and then you can flare out once you reach or cross the property line. And it all comes back to minimizing paving within the right-of-way.
So I think that's the solution that Mr. Holden was talking about. I'm guessing that would make it a little bit less convenient. One solution would be to squish those two 7-foot sections that are in the right-of-way together, and then sort of flare them out once you get onto the property line. I'm assuming that's the solution. That's a little less convenient, but would solve the problem.
Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you, yeah.
Okay, with that, you want to make your comments? Or you want to pass?
Well,
What?
can I pass?
Yeah, that's fine, that's fine. Commissioner Dels.
I like this house. I like that it's a one-story house. And again, to the neighbors, there's two lots behind you, or there's two lots behind you. You could end up with two-story houses. So, always understand the alternatives. And these folks have it is a one-story house, and it's not going up any further.
Very tall, one story.
No comments from the audience at this time, please.
I like the materials. I like that we're going to change the roof, so I would just leave that condition in there. The architect seems okay with it. Actually, the only concern I have right now is conversation with the neighbors behind you, Craig, and I think it's a conversation that just hasn't taken place yet that needs to take place so that we can understand what their concerns are. What often happens is we get something from you written in advance. If you have specific concerns that you would like us to see, we're happy to come onto your property as part of our process. This is only a concept at this point. We have another meeting on this, so there's still opportunity for us to see what your concerns are. So they're not ignored at all. We hear you. Craig is an excellent architect. I think you will find him to be as helpful as he can be. That's all I got.
Okay. Commissioner Karapetkoff.
Yeah, not much to add. I understand the discussion about the driveway. Obviously, we have these requirements to go down to 14 feet. Sometimes it's inconvenient. I think in this garage, the problem is that it's actually two separate doors. Usually when you have one single door going end to end, it's not a problem to just build this cone and start wide at 19 feet and then go to 14 when you hit the street. But when you have something in the middle, it makes it a little bit more complicated. I like the house. The house looks good. It makes sense. Don't see much issues with the windows in the back. If there are any concerns with privacy, we can ask the architect to change these windows to the back and make them semi-transparent or put some privacy glass on it. There's just one small window on the bathroom of the ADU and two small windows on the bedroom. Shouldn't be a problem to have them as semi-transparent because there are other sources of light for these rooms. I like that it's a single-story house. The house next door, I'm always thinking about it. We approved it's a two-story house with metal roof, and I remember the discussion with the architect why he wanted to have the metal roof because it's easier to connect the solar panels on top. This one doesn't have solar panels, and it's probably a good idea to have a different kind of roof in this neighborhood. Yeah, I think it's a very convenient, very rational way of using the space. I have no other comments. Yeah, and the materials look good as well.
And Commissioner Allen.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that has been said. And then, did we verify, is the house next door that is under construction right now, does that have a metal roof also? Do we remember?
The property currently being constructed to the north?
The Lehman project?
Not the Lehman project,
yes,
the other
to the
one.
south, right?
The vacant site to the south was approved with a metal roof. I'm unsure the property to the north, but the one to the south certainly was approved with a metal roof.
With a metal roof, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so since we see a lot of this, if there was an alternative, that would be fantastic. But very thoughtful design, and love that it's single story.
Okay, we have a resolution which has a condition that, number 4, that prior to scheduling final details, the applicant should work with planning to select an alternative roof material. So that is in there. And I'm in agreement with that in this case. 2 metal roofs next door to each other, I think it's a bad precedent. We do need to avoid that. And also, this design, I think, is more traditional than the last design. We looked at the same architect, so I think it calls for a more traditional roof element, which would be the shingle style. I realize this is totally subjective, but we get pushed into this realm of subjectivity. And so I think we have a motion that as staff is fine unless we want some more direction. Although I do think the architect needs to communicate with the neighbor in the back and just make sure that you address the privacy concerns. And there are ways to mitigate that, which you know, and you've done that before. So get that dialogue going, and then when we see it final, we can she can come back and make sure that express to us whether her concerns have been met. So.
I move to approve the resolution as provided by staff.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
Commissioner Delbs?
Yes.
Commissioner Karapetkov?
Yes.
Chair LePage?
Yes. Thank you, everyone. The motion is carried.
Thank you very much.
Okay. That concludes the public hearings. No longer the director, but are you going to give us a report?
To the contrary, sir, I am still the acting.
Oh, you're still the actor.
director.
I'm sorry.
Thank you very much.
Sorry that I
Thank you very much.
elevated you or demoted you. I don't know which.
I don't know what you did to me there, but no. So I am still technically the city's acting director of community planning and building. But my first update is that probably will change very soon. We have made an offer to a candidate to replace me in that position. They have accepted. It's a conditional offer, so we still have to go through background checks, reference checks, and all that stuff. But really, really excited about welcoming somebody new to the city. So we got a really great candidate. I think you'll agree. And the other thing I just wanted to update you on is I'm planning, and this will probably be one of the things I hand off to my replacement, am planning on putting together, I spoke to our CEQA attorney yesterday who works with Brian Pierrick's firm. He's wonderful. His name's Steve Valivas. And we're going to put together a little CEQA training for Planning Commission, City Council, something that the community can attend, because I think what we've realized in the last couple of days with the projects is that there's a real, and it's nobody's fault because CEQA is really boring to most people and hard to understand. I think it's fascinating. I could talk about it forever, but it is something that people at least need to have a basic
Is that what makes you a little odd?
That's one of many things, sir. One of many things. And so, yeah, I think that's really important to get people at least to a basic understanding so that there's not confusions about, how going straight from a categorical exemption to an EIR, that's just not how CEQA works. So getting people a basic understanding of the terms and how it's used and why it exists. So we're putting together a CEQA 101 type of training. Which may be a little pedestrian for you because you've been doing it for a while, but I think let's get everyone to the same threshold first, and then we can talk about 102 and 103 courses for everybody, but that'll be in the near future. That's what I got, unless you guys have any questions for me.
Okay, we're adjourned.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, 8 o'clock.